Welcome, everyone, to another edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. I'm Vince, that's Bryan, that's Trevor, and we're back. It's a Thursday, which means it's defensive day when it comes to some positional breakdowns, and we've got a good one for you. We've got the defensive ends today. A lot going on with the defensive end position, guys. I mean, we're kind of jump into it here. We've got, guys coming back from injury. We got a guy who's already injured. We've got young talent. We've got a change in the way that they're positioning guy. Like, so many different things to talk about, when it comes to this position. There's some battles as to where guys are going to fall in the depth chart, all of the things. And we're going to talk about it all today. I'm really excited about where we're going with this group today. A lot of talent there, a lot of options, even with the injury, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but a lot of stuff to talk about here, Bryan.
Yeah, it's a very unique position. Trev, you and I have had some conversations about this position group where it's arguably one of the two or three biggest question marks on the team as far as, like, we don't know injuries, there's this, there's that. But it's also one of those position groups where if it hits this season, the talent is such that this could be a really big part of the offense. I mean, the defense. It could be a really big part of the team having a lot of success, because it is such a loaded group. And so it makes a very interesting preview time. It makes for a very interesting breakdown because, guys, we could spend the next hour talking about all the unknowns. So we could talk about, well, I don't know how good this group is going to be, because how good's Boubacar going to be? How about this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy? And we could kind of take it down a real sort of negative, questiony path. We could also spend the next hour just like, dude, this guy has big time potential. This guy has big time potential. This guy could be really good. But what about if this guy breaks out? And we could go like down this super like optimistic like path. And both would be true. Both would have accuracy to them, would have truth to them. And I think the presence of those two realities makes this a big question mark. You know what I mean? Like Trev, you could say, okay, well, if we focus on this part, then it's like, dude, I'm kind of worried about defensive end. But if then we focus on this part, it's like, dude, I think the defensive ends are going to be dudes. And that's what makes this position group so intriguing, guys, is, and we're going to kind of go through and break it down, and you'll understand all the different aspects we look about it. But it's what makes it a potentially exciting position, but also one where you got to say, I still need to see it first, because we saw last year at times the defensive end position was a major strength, including in the postseason. I mean, does Notre Dame beat Georgia if the defensive ends don't play the way they do? Maybe. But I know for a fact that they were huge in that game. And it was, Junior's early sack that killed a drive. Burnham, I think on the first or second play of the game, had like a big tackle for loss. You had Junior then recovering the fumble that Adon Schuler created early in the game. And then, of course, you've got R.J. Oben and his big play. And then just the overall, they just shut the Georgia run game down. And so, but then you go look at the Penn State game, and in the first half, other than Burnham coming off the edge on that one big play, they weren't that good against Georgia. And then they couldn't generate any pass rush against Ohio State. So just that up and down level of play, guys, if this defense is going to be as good as it needs to be for them to win a championship, this group has to be better than it was a year ago. It has a chance to be, but there's a long way to go from what we know right now to what they need to be. So it makes for a very intriguing group. And that's why, honestly, I wanted to talk about the DNs first, because it does in a lot of ways. Trev, don't you think it kind of mirrors the quarterback position, where it's like, okay, there's a lot of question marks. There's a lot we don't know, but dude, the potential is sky high.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I was just getting ready to say, I'm so happy that we started out in 1 week with the position previews, talking about quarterbacks and defensive ends in the same light, because I believe those are two of the four position groups on this team that will kind of dictate how far Notre Dame is going to go in the postseason. The success that the quarterback room and defensive end room has will ultimately play a big part in deciding, can Notre Dame make another run to a title? Can Notre Dame repeat their performance that they did outside of the week 2 performance of what they did in 2024 in the regular season? Those two things combined are going to be really crucial to the success of this football team, and I'm happy that that's where we're starting. But you're right. We could talk about both things. We could only be positive. We can only be negative. And I think the truth lies somewhere in between those. And it's okay to talk about both. It's okay to be excited about the potential. And it's also okay to be a little bit hesitant about some of the potential question marks. That is something that I personally am trying to get better at doing, looking at both sides equally, because you guys know me, I'm very much, I need to see it person. So it would also be a little off-putting if I just only talked for the next hour and a half about how awesome Bryce Young is going to be, because last season he ended with 1.5 sacks. But the potential is what gets you excited for this upcoming season. I'm ready to dive into it, man.
Before we jump into what could be in the 25 season, and obviously that's what we're here to do, we need to talk about where we're at now because of the 24 season. I think that's going to be an important piece of this whole thing, because there was a lot of intrigue going into the season about this group, and it's a very similar conversation that we're having this year that we kind of had last year. Like, we like the depth. We like where guys are. We like what this group could be and all of these different things, right? And you go into the Texas A&M game, they played pretty well. Going to Louisville, okay. Very quickly, the injuries started to pile up, and then the entire position just got absolutely decimated. And then guys that you weren't expecting to be key contributors at defensive end had to step up, did a good job, helped the team get to the national championship. So, now you get guys back from injury, and here we are. So let's talk a little bit about last year, guys, and I'll throw it to you, Trevor. Your thoughts on the defensive end group last year, what it looked like, and how the way the season went, why we're excited about this year coming up because of the depth and because those guys got a ton of opportunities.
Yeah, the start of last season was really promising. You had Jordan Botelho coming in and playing his best football of his career so far. Started out hot against Texas A&M. Boubacar Traore's potential started to flash. Really started to flash and started to come on until his unfortunate injury. And even though it wasn't a season-ending injury, Josh Burnham also was hurt, and he also missed 3 games last season. Now, he was able to come back and then played in crucial minutes, and he seemed to be back up to 100% speed by the time the postseason rolled around, but that's still missed production. We're talking about a unit in where Junior Tuialamaka didn't play a single snap of defense the first 2 games, and then ended up coming in second place on the team, not just in the defensive end room, second place on the Notre Dame defensive roster in total pressures generated last season. And so I think that's a testament to Al Washington. It's a testament to the guys in that room to when their number is called, they're ready to go. But I don't know. You could make the argument that the defensive end position specifically was affected the most by injuries over the course of last season. Obviously, we know the trenches as a whole, offense and defense were, but the defensive end position specifically, Bryce Young got thrust into moments that I'm sure based on his potential, he probably would have seen some minutes in. But by the end of the season, he was starting to take more snaps and end games with more snaps than R.J. Oben, despite not being the number one guy that trotted out the first series on defense. And so it forced some kids to grow up a little bit quicker. Logan Thomas in the smaller minutes that he had, very effective player, things that we're going to be diving into later on. But this unit as a whole, completely different outlook where it was on January 20th than what it was on August 31st last season, I believe. So it's definitely going to be one to keep an eye on this season.
No, I think it's like you look at last year, there was so much potential that we thought the group had. You're looking at what we thought R.J. Oben was going to bring to the table, and this is why I'm willing to talk so much about what this group could be, but why I'm also feeling the need, like you said, Trev, to push the pause button and look at it and say, okay, look, this group has potential, but we also thought R.J. Oben, who had about 20 career sacks, was going to be a good player last year, and he had 1 sack all year. Now, it was a massive sack, but it was the only one, and he played hard, but he wasn't the guy we thought we were going to see. We spent all offseason saying, look, I don't know how much I even want to talk about Jordan Botelho because we spent so much time talking about him in the last couple of years, and then he doesn't produce. I'm in show me mode, and then he comes out and he shows me for 2.5 games, and then he gets hurt. And we talked about Boubacar's potential and what he could be. And he was that till he got hurt. We talked about Josh Burnham, and I thought Josh made the progress that he was the one guy that I felt made the progress that we hoped he would make last season. And then Junior, like, I don't really know what Junior's role is. And then it was a question mark coming into the season. And I didn't have Junior Tilamaka as like the guy that's going to make or break the position group going into the season. And that's exactly what he was. If Junior Tilamaka, bails because he's not going to be the guy, or if he's got a really crappy attitude all fall camp in the first 2 games because he's not playing a single snap on defense, which is exactly what happened. He did not play a single snap on defense. If his head's not in the right place, who knows what last season looks like, guys? And so that's kind of where, just kind of where I'm at in regard to why I'm kind of, there's some excitement, but also some concern because the DN position didn't go anywhere like we thought it was going to go last year, guys. At all. And it ended up being okay, but it wasn't as good as we hoped it would be. And now you're like, okay, well, fingers crossed that it's gonna go again, and kind of be what we hoped it would be. And you just the law of I mean, I'm trying to think of like the way to express this, guys, but like the law of averages is going to tell us that this position group's not going to battle the injuries it did last year. But what's the first offseason injury that this team dealt with?
Defensive end.
It was another defensive end injury,
right.
So
right.
It's going to be very interesting to see what this group can do. It is. And so much of the season hinges on,
on this group.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you're not wrong. I just talking about last year, and you're absolutely right. It didn't go right for that group. I mean, it just didn't. And if you would have asked anybody on the defensive staff or Marcus Freeman, draw up a perfect scenario or draw up the scenario you think is going to happen with the defensive end group, they would not have drawn up the way 2024 went, right? No. Well, they went through it. They got through it. And now as you look back on it, as we look forward to 25, looking back on 24, knowing that there was a lot more guys that got a lot more snaps than we probably would have anticipated. We saw obviously good flashes early in the season before these guys got hurt. All of these things, when you just all roll it up into one big ball and then you throw it out there for 25, Bryan, does it give you positive thoughts going into 25? Because those guys have some more experience and you've got some battle-tested guys that we didn't think were going to be battle-tested going into 25.
It is interesting because Josh Burnham got thrust from being hopefully a complimentary player to, dude, you kind of got to be a dude for Notre Dame. Bryce Young got thrust in from being a guy that, okay, he's a freshman, he'll earn whatever he gets, to like, and early in the year we saw Bryce was playing a little bit, but not a ton, to like, dude, now we just need you to be one of the guys. I always think those things benefit the future team. In very rare instances have I ever seen a guy get a bunch of experience and then it doesn't help him at all. And usually those guys just aren't that good, or they kind of played above their ability, so to speak, or, for a shorter period of time the year before. But these guys were thrust into the role so early that if it like Junior made a lot of plays early. You guys remember, like he was good against Purdue, and then he has the interception against Miami of Ohio, and he made a couple plays early. If he wasn't able to help you, and it was just kind of the teams weren't prepared for him, by game 4 or 5 of his season, Junior would have got exposed. It didn't happen because he's a good football player, and so those things would have kind of okay, now they figured it out. And same thing with like Leonard Moore. If Leonard Moore, let's say Benjamin Morrison plays all year and he gets hurt against Georgia, and Ohio State and Penn State struggle to figure out how to get to Leonard Moore, you'd be like, well, okay, he did well, but like they didn't have a lot of film on him. Well, he steps into the lineup in game 5 to start at one spot, and then 2 games later, he's in the starting lineup for the rest of the year. If he had those giant holes, they would have got exposed. And so it's not just that they played a lot, Vince. It's because they were thrust into the lineup early, and we saw what they can do all year. It's kind of like you have the same group you did last year, except they're a year older, and you're adding Boubacar Traore to it. You're adding Logan Thomas to it, a different version of Logan Thomas to it. You're going to eventually add a Jordan Patello to it. Guys you just basically did not have last year. And when Notre Dame started to really make their run, where they turned the corner as a team, they didn't have Boubacar. They didn't have Patello. And then, we saw obviously Logan Thomas was limited to a certain role last season. And then, of course, you didn't have Cole Mullins last year, who got hurt before the season. Now you throw him into the mix. And it's almost just like you've got your same group as last year. You replace RJ Oben with Bubakar, and let's see how that goes. And then and you add Cole Mullins, you add an older, stronger Logan Thomas. You're going to eventually add Jordan Patelho, and it certainly should make you kind of excited about what this team can be. Because I think a lot of the growing pains that maybe we expected some of those guys to make this year or even later in the year, like I think we all expected Bryce Young to eventually become a prominent player, but he was kind of thrust into that role way earlier than expected. I think that might have hurt him a little bit last year at time, or at least early on, but it's going to help him this year. And that's part of where my excitement comes from. And we just haven't seen a lot of D lineman guys just stagnate under Al Washington. That's another thing that needs to be talked about, Trev, is, well, I mean, Vince, I get your thoughts on this because we've been, you and I have been talking about, the D line and Al Washington for years. We just haven't seen a lot of guys in Al Washington tenure go from year 1 to year 2 or year 2 to year 3 and just be the same guy.
Right.
Or regress.
Right.
Guys tend to get better. Burnham got better from 2023 to 2024. Bubakar got better from 23 to 24. Patelho got way better from 23 to 24.
Oh, yeah.
And Junior got better from 23 to 24. The only guy that regressed is the guy that they brought in from the outside.
Mm-hmm.
Bryce Young got better from September to January.
One season, yeah.
So that also kind of, for me, adds a little bit of something to this where it's like, you could look at there have been guys that have regressed under Al Washington, but because it's like one guy here, one guy there, a lot of times I put that on the play. I've said, Vince, you've heard me say this many times.
Yeah.
If one or two guys in a position group don't improve, but the rest do, that's usually more about those players.
Mm-hmm.
When the majority of the position group or a bigger chunk of a position group doesn't improve, that's on the position coach. So that's what was our issue with the O-line under Jeff Quinn. It's like the unit as a whole struggles consistently. That was our issue with the receiving core under Del Alexander. It's like it's not just one or two guys. It's the whole unit struggles to really make the jumps. That hasn't been an issue for Al Washington during his tenure. For the most part, guys get better from one year to the next. Howard Cross took a step back, but you saw Briley Mills take a big jump. And that's what leads me to believe that to have more optimism that I think this unit is poised to take a jump.
For sure. And Trevor, I'm going to throw it to you here in just a second, because they're to Brian's point, there's a bunch of experience. There's a bunch of depth here. There's different kinds of players that we're talking about. There's not just a mold, I guess, that they're employing on the end of the defense on the outside. It's not a one size fits all kind of a situation. There's some different kind of guys out there that Notre Dame's going to be relying on. And I think for the first time in a long time, guys, I do feel like Notre Dame, the defense, the team, they could potentially lean on the edge guys a little bit here, more so than they have in the past. I think that there's enough depth, there's enough experience there where, okay, this is a group now. It's not just going to be like, I hope you guys just do your job. It's going to be, I think these guys can make some plays.
Well, Trev, I think that's what's interesting about some of the stuff I'm hearing about the defensive line. Because one of the things that Chris Ash is doing is one of the changes I think we're going to see is he's going to ask the defensive line to do more. And from what I'm told, that is a reaction to what he saw from the defensive line in the spring. Not so much this is my system. His system has done that in the past. Obviously, it's easy to do that when you've got Joey Bosa and Adolphus Washington and Michael Bennett, Sam Hubbard, and Taekwon Powell and some guys like that. That he had, not Taekwon Powell, but it was Lewis. But when you've got those kind of guys, well, sure, it's more so like he was in. This is what I was told. He was kind of liked what he saw from the defensive ends. You got to think about it. He hasn't seen Bubakar yet. He hasn't seen Bubakar take a live snap. But now he has watched Bubakar on film, and that adds to the conversation. But it's why they're recruiting the way that they're recruiting this because they do want defensive ends that can do more. And at the end of the day, guys, that's going to be a big part of what we're going to need to see from this group is because they're making the changes that they're making schematically, they're going to ask a lot more of this group. And when we talk about expectations for this unit, Vince, to your question, it's you've got to be able to make more plays. What I thought last year's defensive end group did a really good job of was do your job. I thought, with the exception of a game here, a game there, and everybody has games like that. I mean, the 2017 offensive line didn't play great a couple of times that season, didn't play great against Miami, didn't play great, in my opinion, I thought against Stanford that year, but played great most of the other games. Everybody has those moments. But they were really good at like doing your job. You've got to set the edge. You've got to make sure you're controlling the B gap here. Maybe you've got to control the C gap here. And you've got to make sure that you're the contain guy. You've got backside contain. You've got to do your job. I thought that for the most part, I thought the defensive ends last year just did what they were asked to do last season. And that's great. That helped because that fit Al Golden's scheme. I think what Chris Ash wants to do is saying, hey, our expectations of you now are we need you to be more playmakers. Yes, you have to do your job. I don't want you making plays at the expense of, you had a tackle for loss here, but then the next two plays, you didn't control the gap you were supposed to control, and they bounced runs for big plays. That's not what he's talking about. But it's, hey, we need you to be more playmakers. We need you to do a better job of getting off blocks and getting to the running back. We need you to do a better job of providing wins on the edge in the pass game where I don't have to blitz 5-6 guys in order to get to the quarterback in a key moment, especially on first and second down. Third down's a little different deal because, you're trying to maybe get the ball out quicker and things like that and some different things. But you need this group to be more playmakers, Vince. And when you talk about sort of the expectations, part of the struggle last year, especially in the middle of the season, was a lack of continuity. Because we talked about all the guys they missed, and we didn't mention that Josh Burnham missed 3 games at the beginning of the season. He got hurt against Northern Illinois and then missed the next 3 games. And then what does he do the first game he comes back? He has a very strong game, including forcing a fumble that he then recovers and runs back and gets him in touchdown range against Stanford. So, but they want more of that. There's too much talent in this room for to them not have more of that. Last year you understood it because, Vince, we talked about it in the summer. You've got 2 guys that are part of the depth chart in Burnham and Junior who are still learning the position. It was really Burnham's second full year playing the position. Well, now he's going to it was his first full year playing the position. This year is his second full. Well, actually, hold on a second. He was a 22 kid. Yes, so this will be his 3rd year as a full-time end. You saw 2023, he showed some flashes, but didn't make a lot of plays. 2024, he starts to make more plays, ties for second on the team in tackles for loss. Make some big plays in key moments, including not just Stanford, but we talked about the Penn State play. Okay, now it's time to take your game to an even higher level, but that wasn't necessarily what we expected of him last year. Now it is. Junior has proven himself to be a guy that can do certain things. We need him to, Bryce Young, you're not a freshman anymore, so they're just in a position where, I think the expectation from the coaching staff, and my expectation certainly, is when you've got the talent that this group has, the length that this group has, the athleticism that this group has, and now the experience that this team has, Trev, the expectation is now that your potential starts turning into production. We use that phrase a lot, and I think that's going to be a big key for this unit. And it's going to be a big key for this defense. I don't know that this defense can reach its full potential without the D-line taking a jump. And we'll talk also about this next week with the D tackles. But the DNs are part of that too. You got to go from just being a bunch of guys that do your job to guys that do your job while also making a lot more plays. And that's the expectation for this unit in 2025, in my opinion. And if they want to win a championship, they're going to need – I'm not saying they've got to look like the world's greatest defensive end unit on planet Earth, but they've got to certainly be better playmakers and more consistent playmakers than they were a season ago.
There's a lot of parity between the defensive end position and the wide receiver group on offense in my eyes. Last season, it was a lot of, okay, you did your job. You were good run blockers. You made some catches when given the opportunity. And very similar to the wide receivers' performance in the postseason, I thought the defensive line played pretty well in the postseason in moments. The Georgia game is what makes me the most optimistic about the season because I think I can join you fellas in saying that I am also cautiously optimistic in this group. There's a lot that they have to show me, and I feel the same way about the wide receiver room. But if you go back and look what they did against Georgia, that is where the bulk of my optimism comes from, truly. It was exciting watching what they did in moments throughout the regular season, but I put a lot of weight into what teams, players, position groups do when the lights are the brightest in the biggest moments. And when Notre Dame had an opportunity to get their first major bowl win in 31 years, they held Georgia to their lowest scoring output since 2021. They tied Ole Miss. Ole Miss and Notre Dame this year held Georgia's offense at 10 points. They're the first two teams that had done it since Clemson in 2021. And what are two things that those games had in common? Georgia got dominated in the trenches on the line of scrimmage, and Ole Miss was known for having a really good defensive line. And Notre Dame's defensive line was able to have similar success what Ole Miss's was able to. And in that game, when you saw R.J. Oben have the strip sack that he had, and you saw the game that Junior Tuialamaka had, and you saw the game that Josh Burnham had, and you see a true freshman in Bryce Young coming in and playing meaningful snaps in the Sugar Bowl as an 18-year-old, that's what propels forward a lot of the excitement for this season. But expectation, we've been talking about it all offseason long. You got to take a step forward. Got to take a step forward, because if Notre Dame wants to reach the level that they are, it's not good enough anymore to just do your job. That is now the bare minimum expectation. When you talk about guys like Bryce Young, you're a true freshman. You're getting your feet wet. It's your first time taking collegiate snaps. Your focus is doing your job. That moves from your kind of like middle of the road potential ceiling expectations to that's now your floor. Hey, you're 6'7", you're 265. You know your job now. Now it's time to use your playmaking ability and your potential. Play to your ceiling and go make plays week in and week out. Playmaking ability consistently is going to be the expectation for me this upcoming season, because we saw at times last year them make plays. But ideally, you don't go 1 week you're on, 1 week you're off, then you're on for 2 weeks, then you're off for 3 weeks, and so on and so forth. So consistency from this group is going to be huge.
One of the things that is different this year than there has been in the last few years for Notre Dame on the defensive side of the ball, and we're talking some scheme, a little bit of a little schematic difference, and that was kind of not a bomb that was dropped, but a piece of information that was dropped on us when Bryan and I had a chance to sit down with Marcus Freeman a couple of weeks ago, and he told us that there was not going to be any more big end Viper. It was going to be more right and left, which is interesting, and that is going to change things just a little bit. And for those of you that don't know what that means, we kind of wanted to break it down a little bit just to kind of so people understand what that means and why they're doing it and things of that nature. So, Bryan, I'll kick it over to you for kind of a Cliff's Notes version on what it means to go from Viper and big end to right end, left end, and kind of how they're going to do things and what's going to be asked of those positions moving forward and why that's different and why they're doing it.
While we're doing this, I'm actually going to try to pull up some film
nice.
and maybe take a couple screenshots. We'll see how quickly I can get that brought up. But what Notre Dame basically did last year is, as you mentioned, they had that Viper and they had the end. Called it the defensive end. We'd call it the big end just to try to differentiate it, but it was the Viper. And what that meant for Notre Dame was they would be in situations where they would have their Viper play at the boundary. So it would basically be primarily built off the field. So if the ball was on the right hash, the defense's right hash, then you would have the Viper line up at that position. The Viper would then go to the boundary. So like he'd go to the right, and then the Viper would go to the left. And then when you got into other situations where, they would opposite hash, the end would then go the opposite side. And so if the next play, the ball went on the left hash, and then the defensive end or the Viper would then go to that side. He would then go to the left side. And I'm looking at it from the defensive point of view. And so what they've decided to do, and so like if the offense changed positions, then that would kind of, sometimes they've shifted, it would maybe put them in a little bit of a spot where it's like, okay, now you're being asked to do things that you haven't done as much. And then in other situations, like if a team's going tempo, it kind of puts you in some binds. We'd see times where Notre Dame would kind of shift they do a motion. And so then Notre Dame would kind of go right back at them. So instead of what they're going to ask to do, and then, there's different responsibilities with that. A Viper's almost always outside the tackle. Defensive end is a lot of times he'll be tucked inside the tight end. We'd see a lot of that. We didn't see a ton of, 9 technique type stuff from Notre Dame, which is like outside the tight end with that position. And so there's different responsibilities with those two positions. Whereas now when you look at it and you look at how Notre Dame's playing the position, it's like you're staying on one side. And so that means if the ball's in the right hash and you're lined up into the boundary, if on the next play you're on the right side of the defense, if on the next play, that team is all of a sudden on the left hash, you're still on the right side, but now you're to the field instead of being in the Viper, which means you have to know more techniques. You have to know more calls. You have to be a guy that can play in space if needed to. You have to be able to drop because, now it's not a situation where it's always just the Viper that's going to drop into coverage. Both end positions need to drop into coverage. So it's adding a lot to the plate of the Viper. And that's kind of where I'm coming from when I talk about, there's being more expected of this group now because of the change, the philosophical change at this point in time. So it also, what it does, guys, in my opinion, is it also, one of the benefits of it is I also think that it puts them in a situation where there's more, it gives you more, it gives you more personnel opportunities to mix and match. So where last year when you had all the injuries at Viper, Josh Burnham had to kind of change positions. And so then him and Junior playing the same position. They weren't on the field at the same time very often. And him and Bryce Young were the same, kind of the same position, would have played the same position early in the season. They were both ends. Well, now you get into a situation where it's now flipped where you could play Junior and Josh together. You could play Josh and Bryce together and it be more effective. And so I'm going to give you an example here. I was able to kind of get that done while I was talking, which you guys know I usually don't do very well with that. But here's what I'm talking about right here. So this is against Texas A&M. Ball's on the left hash for the defense. So the Viper is going to the boundary. The boundary is the short side of the field. So as you can see, the Viper, that's Jordan Patelho lined up there. This is a base down look. You can see it, 2 linebackers, nickel, 2 safeties, and 2 corners. And then the end is to the field. Well, this next clip is Notre Dame lined up on the right hash for the defensive side. So now the Viper is on the right side, and the defensive end, you can see, and that's Drake Bowen where the end is, but like you see the end inside of Drake Bowen right here. So that's Drake Bowen right here. So this right here, that's Drake Bowen. The linebacker walked up, but you can see the guy right inside of him. That's Josh Burnham. That's a defensive end. And so they would flip sides. This year in this situation, if you're looking at it here, so let's say it's Jordan Patelho was on both snaps. So let's say Jordan Patelho's on the field. Now the ball's in the left hash. He's on the left side. On the next clip, the ball's on the right hash. He'd still be on the left side. And so it just gives them opportunities to one thing that it gives them an opportunity to do is to say, hey, I can play Bryce and Josh at the same time. I can play Junior and Josh at the same time. I can play Boubacar and Logan Thomas at the same time, or Boubacar and Patelho at the same time. It's now just about, it's not so much about who's the Viper, who's the end. It's what are my combinations that I want to go with. But it also asks a lot more of those players because now you've got to be able to do all the things the end does when you're lined up to the tight end side or to the strong side or the field side. You're going to play that differently than when you're in the boundary side. So it does put more on their plate. And I think they're in position to handle it better than they would have last year.
Yeah.
But that's the trade-off
right
to it. But it also is going to, well, that's right, left. That's the right and left. There's another thing they're going to change, but that's sort of the right and left part of it.
So as people were watching the visual that you put out there, which is awesome. And people, if they remember watching the team the last few years, they will know that the Viper was usually a stand-up end, and the other side usually had their hand in the dirt, right? And I realize it's fake grass a lot, but you know what I mean. 3-point stance.
Black dirt versus brown dirt. That's
right.
all it is. You know
yeah,
what I mean?
Exactly. So
the black dirt's more annoying because it gets in your socks. And
yeah, seriously.
You know.
You just walk through there and you get it in your shoes. But anyway, whatever. But do you think that's going to be like personal preference for the kids as far as whether up or down or whether that's scheme? Like, where do you think that goes? It doesn't matter at all.
Yeah, that I don't know.
Okay.
And I think what it's going to be is, if you're, I mean, I don't know. my guess would be is that they would basically say, if you're checked, we know the strength call.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're opposite the strength call, you're on the boundary side, then you're going to be able to be in a 2-point stance. So I think we'll still see guys being a 2-point stance. I don't think it'll be a personal preference. I don't know that you want both of your ends standing up in a 2-point stance, especially the guy that's to the strong side. So I would imagine part of that is, where's he lined up? If he's lined up in a 9 technique, okay, you may have him be there. But if you're in a 7-eye, I don't care what your personal preference is, get down in a 3-point stance so you can have leverage to be able to play certain things, see certain things, and be able to execute your job a little bit more effectively. So, Vince, I don't know the answer to that.
Sure.
We saw some things in the spring game that leads me to believe that we will see sort of the boundary side guy do that. I think there will be times where you'll see them travel because there may be some matchup reasons where maybe they might say, hey, I want you to the weak side in this game. But that's what being right-left allows you to do, is it just gives you more versatility with how you're going to line up. Because you may say, hey, listen, in this particular game, based on how this team plays, they almost exclusively have their boundary tackle by himself. They just don't, when the tight end is to the boundary, he's running a route, he's, releasing, he's going to motion, something like that. So in this game, we always want Boubacar traveling to the short side because we want to get him in those solo matchups. So you can go and you can do that more now because you don't have to teach a guy a new technique. It's like you just can't up and decide, in a game if your cornerbacks are playing left right. It's like it's harder to field boundary. It's harder to say, okay, well, we're now just going to, in this particular game, have you travel. We talked about that last year in the championship game because he's playing something different. He's playing in different space, different alignments, different calls, things like that. You haven't prepared that. Now, because they're being asked to kind of know it all, they're almost like receivers, because we always talk about how receivers can play any part of the offense. They know the routes, they know the whole package. So you have receivers can play certain things. And the other thing too is if you're just playing left and right, the one thing it allows you to do is it allows you to simplify sort of, I'm always playing with this hand in the ground. I'm always using this dominant eye. But even then, you won't always see the same guy playing left and right. But on that particular series, it allows you to know, here's who I'm going up against on this play, right? So I'm the right end, means I got to study the left tackle. I'm only playing right end this game. I got to know the left tackle as opposed to now I got to study the right tackle, left tackle, know how this guy does that. And it also allows you to say, hey, we're going to go put Boubacar on this guy the whole freaking game. We're going to put Boubacar, Logan Thomas, and Bryce Young on this guy the whole game because this is a guy we can go after, and these are our best pass rushers. So these are our right ends this week, just as an example. So I just think it gives you a lot more options, a lot more matchup options for you against them. It gives you a lot more personnel options for your own defense where you may say, hey, look, this is a week where we want these two guys really playing together, or a week where maybe we want these guys kind of rotating in at one spot to take care of a matchup. And it just allows you to do that as long as your players can handle the volume that they're going to be asked to do now from a mental, technical standpoint, because they have to know more technique and know more assignments this year than they did a year ago.
So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about the depth chart, and then we're going to jump into each individual guy, all that fun stuff. Before we do, though, make sure you hit that like button, that subscribe button, that notification bell. Share with your family and friends. Join us over on the boards.irishbreakdown.com if you want the intel. Obviously, this is a very busy time in recruiting, guys. And so if you want the intel, if you want to know where things are going or trending, I should say, you want to jump on the boards.irishbreakdown.com. And then, of course, always jump over to irishbreakdown.com because there's all kinds of great written material in there by these two guys, Trevor, Bryan, Sean, stuff up there, some other contributors. So you definitely want to check out irishbreakdown.com. But again, if you want the intel, you got to head over to boards.irishbreakdown.com for all the good stuff. The next thing we're going to talk about, gentlemen, is we are going to jump into kind of the depth chart, right? What does it look like overall? Who do we see where, that kind of a thing? Is there Is there going to be designated left and right and all of these different things? There's a lot of question marks here as far as what the defensive end position is going to look like with the depth chart. Bryan, what are your thoughts? And actually, I will kick this over to Trevor. What are your thoughts on the overall depth chart that we're looking at going into fall camp? To get through the summer, all of those things. Your thoughts on the depth chart overall, just where it's at, just your thoughts, my man.
I think the depth is it's obviously in a much better spot than what it was, say, in November of last season. In terms of depth, I love the move that Cole Mullins is back in the end position. He's going to round out the depth. We'll talk more about him later in this segment. But the biggest thing that I like about this group as a whole is I love the diversity of talent. Very similar, again, I'm going to draw another analogy to the wide receiver room, but you don't want to have 6 guys that can all do the same thing. Bryan talked yesterday about Texas A&M's heralded defensive line class and how good they all were, and brought up points like, yeah, that's great, man. They can all play like 2 positions. And so I don't really know what that does for your group. And so when you look at Notre Dame's defensive end makeup, you have players in there with different skill sets. Now, we will also talk about what they need to do to improve to become more well-rounded defensive end players. But you do have players in that room with strengths. You have a guy like Boubacar who can pin his ears back and get after the quarterback at a very high efficiency rate. You have an end in Josh Burnham, who is known a little bit more as a run stuffer. In the same vein that Boubacar is going to have to kind of round out his abilities as a run stopper, Josh Burnham's going to kind of have to round out his abilities and reach his full potential as a pass rusher. You have somebody in Bryce Young who has the size and the specs to be a future first-round NFL draft pick. He's got to kind of hone in and get his feet under him a little bit. Cole Mullins is a year removed from an injury, I believe, and he made the transition back to defensive end this offseason. But he looked really natural there, like I've talked about a lot this offseason. Then in somebody like Logan Thomas, he's another one that you pin the ears back and he can get after the quarterback in a very, very high efficiency rate. And so when I look at this depth chart, I am really pleased with the diversity of talent that it has. You don't just have a bunch of just 6'4", 280-pound guys that you're just kind of relying on setting the edge. You have diversity of athleticism, size, talent. You have guys like Junior Tuialamaka in the room, who's just kind of like your jack of all trades. We saw him get after the passer a little bit last season. We've seen him set the edge before. He's shown the ability to do that. So those are kind of my initial takeaways when I look at Notre Dame's overall depth in that room.
Bryan, what are your thoughts on the depth chart, kind of where things stand right now?
Well, obviously not having Jordan Patejo to start the season is not an ideal aspect. Here's just this is the my post-spring summer depth chart before we got word that they're going to be playing right and left. So just keep that in mind. But this just kind of gives you a sense of who all right now is healthy. And there's a lot to like there, guys. There's a lot of talent here. There's now a lot more experienced talent. And arguably you could maybe say your most talented pass rusher is your least experienced guy of the returners that played last year in Boubacar Traore. So I think there's a lot of different body types. Junior Tuialamaka and Josh Burnham have very different body types. Junior Tuialamaka and Boubacar Traore have very different body types. Burnham and Boubacar have very similar body types. Logan Thomas has a very unique body type to the other guys. Cole Mullins has a very unique body type to anybody else. Chris Burgess I'll be shocked if when we get the official roster, if Chris Burgess is 245, I'll be shocked if that's what his weight is. But there's a lot of different skills. Junior's more of a big physical power player, sets the edge, can win with power. Boubacar's that really twitchy, athletic kind of get after a guy. Burnham's the high motor guy that needs to start using his athleticism more. You've got Cole Mullins as a big power guy. Bryce Young is just a freaky athlete. So there's a lot of different body types here too, on top of having different skill sets. And so I think what that allows Notre Dame to do is, if they can remain healthy, is it does give them the ability to kind of play matchup football at times, meaning, hey, we've got this is a team that's real big and physical and they want to run the ball at you. And so maybe this week we see more Cole Mullins, or we see more Bryce Young and Junior on the field together. We see the Junior on first and second down a little bit more than Boubacar in this particular game, since Boubacar hasn't shown himself to be a great run defender yet. So there's all types of things that you can do because you don't have 6 guys that do the same exact thing. And so I just think overall, Trev and Vince, I like the depth that this line has. Not a single freshman has to play this year. So you don't need Chris Burgess to play. If he helps you, it's because he earns it. And then the guy missing from this list is Jordan Patelho. You're going to get him back towards the middle end of the season and be able to add him to the depth chart with sort of fresh legs. So I think it's a good depth chart, but it's not one that right now gives me all warm and fuzzies in regard to, like, I know what they're going to do. It gets me excited when I think about what they're capable of doing, but this goes back to our earlier conversation. You start looking at it saying, like, there's a lot that I still need to learn about this group. The other thing you notice about it from an eligibility standpoint, it's a very young group. I mean, there's 9 guys on this particular list. 7 of those 9 guys have freshman or sophomore eligibility. So that certainly bodes well for the future.
And only one guy exhausts his eligibility, except
on
for Patelho.
This group. But when you add Patelho, Vince, it's 7 out of 10.
Yeah.
Instead of 7 out of 9, that's still a big chunk of your depth chart. Not only has eligibility beyond this year, but has eligibility beyond 2026.
Yeah, right.
And so that's something that makes this a little bit interesting, but it's still a very young group, and that's why we have so much of the unproven nature. And then Josh Burnham spent a chunk of his freshman year playing linebacker. Junior spent a chunk of his freshman year playing linebacker. So they're still learning the position. They were still learning the position degree last year. Now we need to see them look like the veterans that they are. And that adds a little something to it.
So it's interesting that you pull up the depth chart so we can actually see where these guys are kind of slated at the moment, because I'm a visual guy. I like to look at the depth chart and, as we're talking and seeing who's where and all of those different things. What's interesting about defensive line in general, but specifically the defensive end, there are position battles going on here, right? But it's not like, left tackle. Like it's not like, okay, one guy's going to win it and then the other guy's going to be on the bench. Like this is a different scenario because they do rotate their defensive line and their defensive ends and things of that nature a lot, right? And so the battle isn't necessarily who's going to be out there on the first snap. The battle is who's going to be out there for the majority of the snaps, like when it matters. You know what I mean? Like it's going to be interesting this year, don't you think?
Yeah, I look, because there's multiple layers to this, Vince. That's
right.
Different than last year. It's not so much, okay, you're a Viper, you're an end, but it's like, okay, who's going to be right, who's going to be left? There gets to the point in time where now you may say, hey, listen, this guy was a Viper last year, but he was way more effective when he was in the boundary to the right than he was to the left. Why? Some guys just may play better left-handed or right-handed, or some guys just have more in their body move. It's like, think about basketball. There's some guys who are great athletes, but when they go right, but when they ask them to go left, they're just not as good doing that. Same thing with football. There are certain guys who, we've talked about this as offensive line. There's just some linemen who just play better right-handed or play better left-handed. It's just, you move a guy from left guard to right guard and it looks like you forgot how to play football. It doesn't happen often, but it does happen. And so I think that factors into who's going to play where. You say, okay, well, right now, like, I honestly, if I were y'all, I would not put any stock into who's where on this depth chart right here. This is just meant to show you who's coming back, because it's going to look a lot different now that it's right left, because you may right now at end, that's more of the big ends, but that doesn't necessarily mean that's where they're going to play. You may see Logan Thomas and Cole Mullins playing right end. We don't know how that's going to look. There's going to be things that go into studying your opponents. What's the percentage of a team that plays on one hash compared to another? Is there anything like that from an analytic standpoint that might factor into those type of things? 60% of the snaps year after year are with the offense, either center of the field or on the right hash, like just something like that. And I'm sure I would hope that their studies going like that. They're going to factor in, okay, then maybe you want your best pass rusher playing more to the right or the left based on that. So you could see right now we've got Junior, Boubacar, Logan Thomas there because they were Vipers, but it may be where Junior Tialamaka is playing left, Josh Burnham's playing left, Boubacar's playing right, Bryce Young's playing right, Logan Thomas is playing left, and Cole Mullins is playing right. I don't know what that's going to look like, but that's what this position battle in my opinion, that started in the spring and now carries into the summer and fall is going to be. It's okay. Are you going to be right or left? Are you guys going to be at the same position, or are you guys going to be opposite sides because we want you on the field together more? Those are the things going to go into it, Vince, because I do think there's a battle for who starts. And then beyond that, there's a battle for who plays more snaps, which could vary from week to week, depending on what your particular strengths are as a player. And then there's going to be a battle for who's in there in the clutch moments. Or is it such where my confidence as a defensive line coach, if I put myself in Al Washington's shoes, is, hey, guys, I have full confidence in all 4 or 5 guys we have in the rotation. So let's stay with our rotation in key moments. Who's fresh? I want to put who's fresh out there. Because like the previous series, we had a 12-play drive and we held them to a field goal, and now we're a 6-point game turned to a 3-point game. Now they've got this game-winning drive. Well, I had Burnham on the field for 8 snaps the last drive, and I had Boubacar on the field for 8 snaps last drive. They played a lot of snaps, so let's go with Bryson Jr. or Bryson Logan or whatever, because I trust all of them. It could also be where, like, no, I don't trust them, and when it's money, or not even not trusting, it's just I want these 2 on the field on money downs or money drives. That's all going to be established in the fall. And that's what the position battle is. You were rightly pointed out, Vince. It's not so much for who starts at Viper, who starts at end. Like, the days of the program are over, where it's like, I'm the starter, seat at the table, let me ran my head through a window. But like, you start, you're the guy, you're primarily the guy. Those days are over. It's going to be a rotation of players. And that's good for the players, especially if you're trying to play 16 games. So it's not so much who starts or who doesn't. It's who's going to dominate the snaps, who's going to be in there when the game's on the line, and who do you want on the field in the fourth quarter? Because that could impact who you are too. Like, hey, I want Boubacar fresh in the fourth quarter.
Yep.
But I have data that shows me Boubacar fades after 30 snaps. I'm not saying that's true. I'm literally just making this up as an example.
Right.
Boubacar fades as a pass rusher after 30 snaps. So I may not start Boubacar because I want to push back him getting to 30 to late fourth quarter as opposed to late third quarter. So all those things kind of, or Boubacar's may only be on the field 4 plays at a time because of that. And you could insert Logan Thomas or Burnham or Bryce Young, whoever. Those are part of the things that your strength program should be learning. It's part of the things that your analytics are studying. Hey, this guy's miles per hour or whatever goes down when he's been on the field more than 5 straight plays. So let's not have him on the field for 5. Those are things that are going to factor into it as well, and that's what the fall is going to tell us about this group.
Yeah, and the fascinating part to me is also, I mean, you kind of brought it up, but I just want to kind of put a bow on it. The fascinating part to me is with these quote-unquote kind of new positions, who knows who's going to start? Like, it could be all over the place, to be honest with you. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean that in this thing's wide open, folks. Like, they're going to get after it, and they're going to find the best way, as you kind of mentioned, the best way to utilize all the talent that they have in that room, barring some kind of a crazy injury, which, again, law of averages, they should be good to go this year. That's the hope. So this is a very intriguing group when it comes to the depth chart. So let's kind of jump into this, fellas. Let's kind of go through these guys kind of one by one. And what we'll do is we'll kind of go through them based on kind of snaps played and kind of go down that list in that regard. But let's talk about these guys. So first on the list, and I think this guy's a very intriguing guy to me because I feel like he kind of gets forgotten a little bit, and I don't really know the reason why. He was thrust into a position to make plays, and he made some plays, especially down the stretch, and that's Josh Burnham. Played over 450 snaps last year. They really leaned heavily on him after all these injuries and everything, and I think he stepped up to the plate. He progressed very, very well in the 24 season. Now it's time to take that next step.
Yeah, when you talk about a guy like Josh Burnham, Vince, you brought it up that he doesn't get a lot of attention. And I think first and foremost, it just goes back to he doesn't have I'm trying to think of how to word this. He doesn't have like that sexy presence that, a Bryce Young brings to the table, a flashy Boubacar brings to the table. He was a high school quarterback and linebacker, moves to defensive end. And he's not really talked about that much, but he's somebody that, one, he's a very high motor kid. And we talked about him a couple weeks ago in that I don't want to put him in the category of like he's just a tryhard. He has a very high ceiling, and he tries hard. That's what makes him such a good player.
But he plays like one though, Trev. Like that's the thing, is he plays like a try-hard guy.
Yes.
And that's what's missing from his game right now. I know what you're trying to say, and you're trying to be nice. So I'll say it. He's too talented to play like a try-hard guy. And when we say try-hard guy in this instance, I'm being somewhat derogatory in that I love the effort, love the motor, but you're just a limited athlete. Josh Burnham's not a limited athlete. He should be playing like more of a difference maker. He's capable of playing like a difference maker. I love what he did last year, Trev. Love it. He was a very important part of this team last year. And when you look at the total snaps, Josh Burnham ranked 10th on the defense in total snaps. 10th. And he was 72 snaps behind Riley Mills. He was over 100 snaps behind Howard Cross. Yet he had more tackles for loss than Howard Cross. And only Riley Mills had more tackles for loss than Josh did last year. But it wasn't by a whole lot when you consider total number of snaps. So even though he was 10th on the defense in total snaps, he was second on the defense in tackles for loss. So the potential is there. The playmaking potential is there. I think Josh's big thing is, I don't know that Josh believes he's as, like, when you watch him play, does Josh strike you as a guy that plays like someone who thinks he's as talented athletically as he is? He doesn't. He plays like a guy like that, hey, I'm going to do my job, and I get excited when I do my job. But, like, I want to see Josh play with a little bit more swagger. I want to see Josh play with a little bit more, dude, I'm going to kick your butt all day today. Like, it's going to be a long day for you today because I've watched the film and I've got something for you. I'm going to dominate you today. And Trev, that's what I want to see more from Josh Burnham, is because I think Josh has the tools to be a more impactful player. He was a clutch player last year. I love that about Josh. But now I want to see him raise his game to the level of, now you're more of a difference maker, where you're forcing defenses to account for you more. And that's what I think he's capable of, Trev, but he's got to take it to that next level. And that really is that's inside of Josh. Now Al Washington's got to teach him some things as far as use your hands better in pass pro. Josh has got to learn Josh doesn't have that same feel as far as getting around the edge that Boubacar does, or that even Junior does. Josh tries to go through people instead of knowing when to kind of dip and rip around people. Those are things that Al Washington can teach him, and I hope that that's something that they're working on. At the end of the day, this is about Josh Burnham just believing, like, you know what, dude? I am that guy. I am that type of talent, and I'm going to show everybody. Yeah, y'all talk about Boubacar and Bryce, and they're great players, but you need to talk about Boubacar, Bryce, and Burnham. That's what you need to be talking about now. It's the 3 Bs, right? That's what we're going to be now. And I'm going to be part of that because he's got the potential to be so. He needs to just let it go. He just looks like a guy that, like, puts a lot of pressure on himself, and it causes him to tighten up a little bit.
That's a bit of a perfectionist kind of on the field.
That's a good way of putting it. That's maybe that's that former quarterback in him, you know?
Yep.
But I just want to see the kid let it rip.
Just go
have some fun, man. You're really talented.
Right.
Now go be that guy and believe that you're that guy, and then go be that guy.
Yeah, it's the belief. And we're not saying that he doesn't believe in himself or anything like that. It just needs to show it. You know what I mean?
NH asked, does he need more fire in the belly? No, that's not what I'm talking about. I think Josh plays really hard. That's the try-hard part that Trev talked about. I think he's got a lot of fire in his belly. I think that's why he plays so hard when he's on the field. It's more about, dude, you're not that undersized, under-athletic guy that has to give me everything he's got just to give me 20 reps. It's more so you got to believe that you're a 6'4", 250-pound, long-armed, athletic playmaker. Like, Josh Burnham plays like he thinks he's 6'1.5", 240 with 31-inch arms, and he's got to play with a great motor all the time to win. I want the motor, but start believing in what God gave you as well and go dominate. I think that's what it's a lack of confidence in himself, in that, well, not even a lot of confidence. It's a lack of belief that I think from watching him, it's a lack of belief in his own ability being what I think it is. And I think a part of it is because his whole life he's playing linebacker and quarterback. This is new to him. And I don't know that he has the same confidence he does when you just like, you remember when he handed him the ball in high school, like it's just like that kid is just like, I'm going to go take this game over. Like y'all can, I'm going to play middle linebacker, I'm going to play quarterback, and I'm going to run to the ball, and I'm going to take this game over because I'm that dude. That's who Josh Burnham was in high school. I think part of it is just maybe not having the same confidence in himself as an end to do what he did as a linebacker and a quarterback. And so it's more, I think he plays hard. I think he's got a fire in his belly. I think he wants to do well. But sometimes it's wanting to do well is part of it. But the other thing is like, I'm pretty flipping good. And I'm going to go show you what I'm capable of. And I'm going to dominate you all day. I think Josh is focused on, I'm going to do my job as best as I can. Well, that's fine, but you're capable of more. You're capable of, I'm going to work this cat from Georgia all day long. That's how Junior plays. Junior has that faith in himself. And Josh has even more talent than Junior, in my opinion. It's just he needs to play with more of that swagger. Boubacar is very confident in himself and should be. I want Josh to establish that type of belief that, dude, when you're on the field, you're going to be better than the guy across from you. Go show it. Go be that guy. And that's where I'm coming from. Does that make sense, guys? Like, it's not that he doesn't try hard. It's not that he's not a hard worker or he doesn't play with emotion. And he plays with a lot of fire. I want him to play with more swagger. That's what I want to see from Josh Burnham. Because I think he's capable of being a dude.
And being a leader of that group, too.
And,
you know what I mean?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And a dude like,
Yeah.
I got to play 35 and 44 or 40. Like, good Lord. Like, I may fake a hamstring injury or something like that on the first series because this is going to be a long freaking day. It's going to hurt my draft stock. Just let her rip, man. That's my advice to Josh. Hey, just have faith in that you are a dude. Josh Burnham, you are a dude. Have faith in yourself that you're a dude, and then just let her rip, man. Don't be so afraid to make a mistake. Get after it. Dominate. Play with that swagger you did when you were a quarterback. That's what I want to see from Josh Burnham. Can I ask you guys this question? Don't you kind of feel like Josh Burnham's the secret ingredient to this D-line, this DN position truly being great? Like, even if Boubacar is what we hope he is and Bryce Young is what we hope he is, they're still kind of young and unproven. I feel like they need that third guy, and I don't mean third in order, but just in general, the third guy into a group of difference makers. I think they need that third guy that's really a game changer to go with those two, especially with Boubacar kind of being likely limited in early season. That's what I think. So I think Josh is important. His emergence to me is ultimately the key to this group truly being elite, where there's not a drop off. Let's just say Boubacar and Bryce are everything we think they're going to be. You want Josh to kind of put himself on that level, so that way it doesn't matter who's in the game, you're going to get worked.
I think part of that for me is because of the role that he was kind of thrust into last year. I feel like more than anything for me, what his benefit to that will be the leadership piece. Like, he's going to be the guy who is a little bit more of a veteran. He has been there when it matters. He produced when it mattered. Now, he's going to have to, like you said, let it go, kind of, be that guy. But I think from a leadership standpoint and then from a production standpoint, if he can put those two things together, then I think that group as a whole will be like, look what Josh is doing. Like, he does that every single time out. That's who we need to be like. And then that allows the talent level of those other guys to take over as well. So I think it starts with as a leader for Josh. And then also then his play will follow that. And then everybody else's play follows that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I agree with that wholeheartedly. I go back and I think about Georgia's defense from last year. A lot of heavy-hitting names. You know what I mean? A lot of guys with, the Jalen Walkers of the world, Michael Williams, Tyrion Ingram Dawkins, C.J. Allen, Smell Munden.
Chaz Chambliss.
But my point was going to be is look, you think of a guy that doesn't get as much recognition as those guys. It is Chaz Chambliss. Like, people – in terms of like household names amongst Notre Dame fans, it's Bryce Young, Boubacar, like all these guys. Got Christopher Burgess coming in. But Josh Burnham kind of falls to the wayside a little bit, just like Chaz Chambliss did a little bit last year on Georgia's defense. But what did he do? He finished last season with 9.5 tackles for a loss, 41 total tackles, 6.5 sacks.
Same numbers as Jalen Walker for the team lead.
Exactly. And so you think about what his impact could be. I absolutely believe that could be very similar to what Josh Burnham's impact could be amongst guys with extremely high ceilings like a Boubacar, like a Bryce Young. I agree 100%.
The next guy we want to talk about is another guy that had to change positions during his Notre Dame career from linebacker to defensive end. So similar path there that we just talked about with Josh Burnham, and that's Junior Tuihalamaka. And based on the list that I'm seeing, he had the second most snaps of anybody at this position last year. He had over 430 snaps played, right behind Josh Burnham. So Junior Tuihalamaka, this is an interesting case for me. I kind of feel like, and you guys can absolutely correct me if I'm wrong, this feels a little bit like a make or break season for Junior. I realize he's towards the end of his career and all of that, but I don't know. Are people thinking of him as a starter? Are people thinking of him as a rotation player? Where does Junior slip in here into this group of defensive ends, Trevor?
I think because of the nature of the room and the makeup of the room, I don't think Junior Tuihalamaka has to go out and get 10.5 sacks for it to be considered a successful season. And that's how I look at him. I am also somebody that's very high on Junior Tuihalamaka. What he did last season, I rave about. Didn't play in the first 2 games, a single defensive snap, ends up coming in second on the team in total pressures generated off the edge, but nobody talks about him. And I understand. I get it. But his role for me, and you guys might differ, but when I look at a guy like Junior, he needs to be the anchor of that edge group for all the reasons that we're talking about these people. We talked about, right end, left end, who can you put in crucial moments. Junior needs to be the guy that Chris Ash and Al Washington can rely on that, hey, we're in a certain situation in this game. I know 44 is going to go out there and do the job and do what we ask of him because he did it for the duration of the 2024 season. While guys like a Bryce Young get his feet under him in his sophomore season, while Boubacar gets back up to 110% healthy, seeing that he's still technically less than a year removed from his knee injury, while a guy like Josh Burnham, somebody who we just talked about, is kind of emerging into that, hey, I know I was kind of a role player last year. I'm that dude now. I think Junior has a role to play on this team, but I don't think it's, 10.5 sacks, 15.5 tackles for a loss for it to be considered a good season for him, if that makes sense. I don't know if that answers your question, Vince, but that's what I see for him. It's not so much the raw production numbers that he's going to put out. It's going to be the role that he plays on and off the field for the rest of the position group for me.
I'm at the point where it's do what you did last year, but be a little bit more consistent of it. That's why I don't think this is a make or break season for Junior. I thought last year was, and Junior made it. He was a guy that, like you said, Vince, started the year on the bench. Special teams guy, played a lot the first 2 games on special teams, but defensively did not play a single snap against Texas A&M or Northern Illinois. And the only reason he played in game 3 against Purdue, where he played 18 snaps, is because the other guys got hurt. And then what does he do the next 2 games? Miami of Ohio and Louisville. He has 6 total pressures, has an interception, and performs well. My thing with Junior is a guy that is going to be your motor guy. He is what Josh Burnham thinks he is. And Junior was number 2. He was number 2 on the defense last year in total pressures with 26, twice as many as Josh Burnham. And so it's like, just keep doing what you're doing, but more consistently. And you'd see Josh, Junior have a great performance against Navy and against the option. He had a great performance against USC. He had a great performance against Georgia. And then he doesn't have a single pressure against Penn State or against Ohio State. And he struggled against Ohio State, and it's just about consistency with him. It's if Junior Tuihalamaka is just a more consistent version of who he was last year, he's a very important part of this rotation. I think they're all rotation players, but I mean it in a different way, I think, than you do, Vince. I think you're saying is like, okay, he's going to come in and give guys kind of breathers and just kind of go do your job. I don't think that's Junior. I think the beauty of this defensive end room is you have a guy that may not start for you. Let's just say Junior's not starting, who had some of the biggest plays in your win over Georgia, who had huge plays on defense in the second half against USC. So I think Junior's a very important part of this. I just don't think Junior is I don't know that Junior, and he could prove me wrong and make me look real stupid, and I would enjoy watching him do so. I don't know that there's another level for Junior to take his game where like he's going to be that 10-sack guy, because I still think middle linebacker is his best position. I still wish they would have left him at middle linebacker to see what he could do. But at the same time, would he have been able to hold off Drake Bowen? That we don't know. Your roster needed him to move. I mean that more for Junior, not so much for the team. I would have liked to seen Junior play middle linebacker. I think that's past. He's already put on the weight, changed his body, all that. But I really thought the kid could play middle linebacker. I remember Vince in 2022 watching them play Boston College when he was playing middle linebacker. Like, dude, this cat can run to the ball, man.
I was super excited about Junior as a middle linebacker. Now, this is obviously pre-Bowen. This is KVA and all of that. But, man, when he came and he signed with Notre Dame, I remember it was either a show or we were talking or whatever. It's like, man, this is the mold of a middle linebacker. Like, this is what you make a little middle linebacker out of. I was excited about Junior. And I was – I don't know if upset is the right word, but like I was disappointed when they moved him over to defensive end.
And
I understood why.
I never felt they gave him a true shot to play middle linebacker.
Yeah, agreed.
That was more of my issue because of the way Al Golden plays, which I understand because he didn't really fit Al Golden's defense. He more was of a fit for I think he actually would have fit Chris Ash's defense better. But that's past. You can't
100%.
You don't reshape his body
100%.
But the point is I think that Junior had his make or break last year, and there's a reason why Junior was not playing a lot early, but he kind of, when he got his chance, he made the most of it, and now you're going to depend on him a lot this year. And so I just want him to be more consistent, where there's some games he's really good and other games where he's like, is Junior playing today? And that's what I want to see. But he's also a guy that's his transition to end is even less advanced than Burnham's because he moved to end later than Josh did. Because Junior was still playing a lot of middle linebacker late in the freshman year, where Josh had kind of moved by the end of by the middle of the freshman year. So I think that Junior just needs to be a more consistent version of what he was last year. If that's all he is, that's great, because that's a really good football player who, again, was second on the defense last year with 26 pressures, despite ranking. What did we say, Vince? Where was he? He was 14th on the defense in total snaps, but he was second on the defense in pressures. I mean, him and Jalen Sneed played about the same number of snaps last year, and Junior had 10 more pressures. Now, Junior also had more pass rush opportunities because he had some first and second down pass rush opportunities that Jalen didn't have. But you're getting the point that he was a productive player in that regard last season. So. Even just like pass rush snaps, Junior was 5th on the defense in pass rush snaps. He played 3 fewer pass rush snaps according to Pro Football Focus than Bryce Young did, but he had 9 more pressures. Now here's the difference: Bryce had more hits plus sacks than the quarterback. So there's that ability to be more disruptive, but I don't know that Junior has quite the closing speed to make a big jump in sacks per se. That's why I say just keep doing what you're doing. Be disruptive, be physical, be a good edge run defender. But it's the consistency part, guys. We'd see last year where Junior would just come up and just rock the tackle in the run game, and then we see plays where he'd get driven out like 5-6 yards off the ball. It's consistency with him. And I'm excited to see him kind of take his game to another level this year and be that guy, because he's a very important part to this rotation. He'll never be the star. He'll never be the guy that gets the love, except when he makes plays like against Georgia. But he's going to be a very important part to this rotation, doing some of the big plays, but also doing a lot of the dirty work.
So the next 3 guys that we're going to talk about kind of fall into the category of super talented, young, with some experience. Okay. That I just made that up. And that's the group I decided that these 3 belong in. And so we're going to go in order of how many snaps they had last year. And obviously that starts with – go ahead.
Vince, if you want to, I kind of think it wouldn't be a bad idea to talk about these 3 together.
And that's fine.
I think you're going to talk about Boubacar, Bryce, and Logan Thomas, right?
Yes, those are the 3 I was referring to, 100%. Yes.
I'll say this, Trev, and I'm going to set you up because I want to get your thoughts on it, because I know what I want to say. But I know a lot of times I say things and you're like, man, I was scared to say that, so I want to give you that shot. But I'll say this and then kick it to you. The difference between Notre Dame being a good defensive end group and Notre Dame being elite defensive end group is what happens with this group of Boubacar Traore, Bryce Young, and Logan Thomas. How well this group takes that jump is going to determine whether this is a pretty good edge room, which I think it will be. And that's what Burnham and Junior and even what those guys did last year gives you, or these cats are game changers. It's this group.
Couldn't agree more. We're talking about the 3 players that have the highest ceiling in this room. I think we can all agree on that.
Maybe on the team.
Yeah.
I mean, on the defense. I mean, you could, other than Leonard Moore, maybe Kingston and Drake. I mean, like this as far as ceiling, like the whole defense of the returners.
And I know some people are really quick to jump the gun and a lot of number projections get thrown out there. I don't need Bryce Young to play like 2027 Bryce Young or 2026 Bryce Young.
Look at Trevor thinking Bryce Young's going to be here as a senior.
Yeah, I corrected myself. It's wishful thinking. Him and him and CJ Carr, and they'll all be here in 2027.
Yeah.
But I want those 3 guys to take the right steps, to take the steps in the right direction to becoming those elite talents that they project to be. Growth is going to be the name of the game for Bryce Young, Boubacar Traore, and Logan Thomas. It's weird to think that Bryce Young now has, significantly more snaps played than what Boubacar does. I think it would have been, I know it would have been a different story given, Boubacar's injury last season, because he was on trajectory to be one of the leaders in the end room in snaps played. But all 3 need to take steps in the right direction, and it'll look a little bit different for each player. For Boubacar, when he comes back, it's going to be getting back up to speed. Everybody kind of recovers from knee injuries a little bit differently. We saw that with Mitchell Evans last season. A lot of times people are, kind of back to true form 2 years removed from that injury than they are a year removed. So I'm going to be evaluating Boubacar more on, hey, like, what does your first step look like? Are you still that twitchy athlete? I expect it to be, because ACL injuries, knee injuries aren't what they used to be. Back in like the 2010s, like early 2010s. That used to be. I remember when Adrian Peterson tore his ACL and he came back in 11 months, be like, dude, he's Superman. And Mitchell Evans, the tight end at Notre Dame, came back in 9.5 months and started against Texas A&M.
Yeah. And did not look like the same player.
Did not, but it's a different type of injury. And so that's where I'll be evaluating Boubacar. For Bryce Young, it's, hey, take just that natural progression with how talented he is. That natural jump from freshman to sophomore year, he's going to look like a much different player than what he did last season. We saw flashes. His sack against Indiana was spectacular. It's plays like that where you look at him and say, all right, how can you block number 30 on a consistent basis? Part of that has to be he needs to play more at a consistent level for that to happen. Now, I think maturation is going to help that out a lot. Logan Thomas is the one where I'm interested to see where he fits in. He is out of the 3, the one that I'm having the hardest time confidently saying, like, this is what that next step in the natural progression looks like, because the sample size with him last year was so small. And so that's where I have a little bit of trouble. But besides the point, fact of the matter is all 3 of these guys need to take that next step forward, because if they do, to Brian's point at the start of this segment, they hold the key to this being an elite group in 2025.
I think with Boubacar, it's about health, because, guys, we've talked a lot about this. I'll just quickly kind of give you the numbers again. But when you look at Boubacar last year, guys, he was starting to look like that guy that we thought he could be last season. And I've talked about this. I'll give you the numbers again. Last year, Boubacar played 62 pass rush snaps in the first 4 games. He only played 3 against Louisville before he got hurt. So he played 65 pass rush snaps, and he had 9 pressures and 5 hits plus sacks on the quarterback. If he would have played at that same rate and had the same number of pass rush snaps that Abdul Carter had last season, he would have had 48 pressures. Now, Abdul Carter had 66, right? So, it's not saying he's as good as Abdul Carter, but, like, that's the disruption rate. But here's the other side of it. if you look at his so more consistently disruptive from Abdul Carter. But here's the interesting thing. He had 5 hits. This is according to Pro Football Focus, 5 hits plus sacks on the quarterback. If you give him, again, the same number of pass rush snaps that Abdul Carter had, he would have had 27 hits plus sacks on the quarterback. Abdul had 23. So you're talking about a level of production that was going to be very, very good for Notre Dame, like elite good for Notre Dame. And then he got hurt. And, you know, he still, despite only playing basically 4 games, he had 4 sacks or 3 sacks, which was 4th in the team. If he would have played the whole season healthy at the rate he was putting up sacks, he'd had 12 sacks last year. So for Boubacar, it's get back to where you were minimum. Now, I don't think that's going to be against Miami. I could be wrong. I hope I'm wrong, but I'm looking at Boubacar more of once you get into October, that's what I'm hoping to really see, that version of Boubacar again, just because of the injury. The good news, Trev, you mentioned the Mitchell Evans injury. Boubacar got hurt about a month and a half to 2 months before him, so hopefully that helps him out a little bit. But the other thing for Boubacar is the pass rush is great, but for you to truly become, right now, Boubacar shows elite pass rushing potential. He's got to do a better job with being a good run defender. That's where his game needs the most improvement. He's got to do a better job of setting the edge, block destruction, gets to run. You know, can he gain a little bit more weight and just be a little bit stronger at the point of attack? That's going to be a key. For Bryce, you know, it's about learning how to just the nuances of the game. I mean, it's you know, Vince, I was thinking about this. You remember the movie Waterboy? Obviously, you remember the movie, but you know, talking about the tackling fuel, right? I was kind of thinking about this, like, I want to like tell Bryce Young that, like, hey, the quarterback's actually a punter. You know what I mean? Like go get him like he's the punter from Georgia. I don't know what that kid did to you or said about your mama, but you know, go get that kid. I joke, but Bryce has such elite tools. I mean, he's 6'7". He's going to be 270 this season.
Yeah.
He's twitchy. He's powerful. You know, it's about, you got to be more of a playmaker though. And he showed flashes of it last year. I still remember the edge rush he had against Indiana, where that right tackle for Indiana was a pretty good player, just was like, had no chance against him. And he's got the talent to be a difference maker, guys. He's just got to, you know, the thing with Bryce is he's just still learning how to dominate. And he's another guy that I think just started to figure out last year that, hey, I'm actually a pretty good football player. And, you know, he only had, I think, what did he finish last year with? It was, we'll see, Bryce Young finished with 1.5 sacks last year. You know, Pro Football Focus had him down for 3, 2 of them in the playoffs. So you started to see that late in the year. You started to see like, oh, okay, Bryce is starting to figure it out a little bit. But there's such another level for him to get to. But I think last year, some of the struggles he had last year with long tackles, big tackles, well-coached tackles, it's going to benefit him greatly because he knows, hey, if I want to be great, I got to learn these things. And I just think he started to play with a little bit more oomph late in the year, a little bit more, hey, I can do this late in the year. And now it's about taking it to another level. I'm not someone who is going to predict that Bryce is going to become a star this year. I think my prediction is it's more next year. This year will be about showing more of the flashes. I don't think they need Bryce to be what we hope he's going to be this year. They just need him to be a older, better version of what he was last year. You know, like give me, you know, 8.5 tackles for loss, 5 sacks, you know, as part of a rotation where Boubacar's getting sacks, Burnham's getting more sacks, Junior's getting sacks. You know what I mean? Anything beyond that's gravy for Bryce. It's like, okay, now he's gone beyond what my normal, that's like just normal year 2 prediction. If he goes beyond just a normal freshman to sophomore year jump for a kid of his talent, that's when he jumps and has sort of like the Stephon Tuitt type of year 2. And that's what he's capable of, having a Stephon Tuitt type of sophomore year. He played more than Stephon did his freshman year. He's capable of that. I just don't want to put the pressure on him where I don't think they need him to be that. As long as Burnham gets better and Junior does his thing and Boubacar comes back, I don't think they need Bryce to be that stud. But if he becomes it, he's going to be good. And then with Logan Thomas, guys, I still think Logan's not quite big enough yet to be an every down player. But I think Logan is going to be the guy that we're looking at on third down is like, that's the guy you got to worry about.
Can Logan have a year like Bryce had last year?
I think Logan can have snaps wise. No, I think Logan's going to be more that guy that on third down and in passing situations you're putting in. He'll play some first and second down, have some success, I think. But he's his role for now until we see him kind of get bigger and stronger and show that he can hold up and not get injured again is more of a, oh, crap, it's 3rd and 5, and I got to go against number 10.
Right.
This is kind of not going to be fun.
This is the NASCAR package,
the pass rush
that kind of thing.
Kind of guy, yeah. And then the more he's able to play on first and second down, like for me with Logan, it's like, dude, play 16 games. But like, who was on the field on the 4th down play against Georgia, the last play of the game? Who was lining up on the edge, rushing the quarterback on that play? It's Logan Thomas. So clearly they have confidence in him in those situations. Now he's a year older, you're stronger. That's one of the most athletic players you're going to see on Notre Dame. Pound for pound, he's one of their most explosive athletes.
That's why he
doesn't get talked a lot about.
Yeah,
but he's also 213 pounds.
Right.
In the spring, and he got banged up. That's the enigma that's Logan Thomas. He's got to stay healthy, and then he's got to get a little bit bigger. But even a 225-pound Logan Thomas on third down is going to be a nightmare.
Agreed.
An absolute nightmare.
I agree.
So it's the different expectations for all three of them, but just between the three of them, that's where a lot of your pass rush production is going to come from at the defensive line position is that trio. And they have a chance to be – they all have a chance to be really impactful players. How close do they get to their potential this season? That's why I say if they're just all good, this will be a really good defensive end position.
Mm-hmm.
But if this unit can – let's one of them becomes a dude and the other two just become really good pass rushers, then this defensive end rotation is going to be elite as long as Josh Burnham also takes that next jump. And Junior just keeps doing what he's doing. That's where I think the potential becomes production. And then, then you throw Cole Mullins into the mix, guys, and, he's a bigger body. He gives you some size, gives some power. He was probably their most impressive defensive end in the blue gold game. Like just setting the edge, being physical against the run, had some good pass rushes like he showed he can get after the quarterback. Remember, I had Cole Mullins as a top 150 recruit coming out of high school with the expectation he was going to become an end. Well, then they tried to move him inside. I think he put on too much weight too fast. He got some of that off, came back from the injury, and this spring, guys, remember, he had a couple really nice pass rushes in the Jersey scrimmage the week before. And the touchdown pass that C.J. Carr threw, you go back and watch that highlight, Cole Mullins slows up on that play because he can't hit the quarterback. In a real game, does C.J. get that throw off because of Cole Mullins' pass rush? That's a fair question to ask. So, I think he's got a chance to be a guy that really helps his team, and nobody's really talking about him a whole lot. But I think he's going to be part of this rotation, especially early in the year with Patelho out and Boubacar not quite 100% just yet.
Yeah, and that's the key because somebody is going to have to step up with Patelho being out at least the first half of the season, right? I mean, somebody's going to have to take over those snaps. It could be, like in Moneyball, it could be, all these guys kind of step up a little bit to take care of those snaps, or it could be somebody like Cole Mullins who steps up and maybe takes the bulk of those snaps. He's kind of the enigma with this group, in my opinion, because he did look very good in the spring. I think he's finally matured in a on the field situation, physically, mentally. I think he's in a position where he can take that next step. And if he can, and then Patelho comes back, now you've got all kinds of depth and talent and everything else. And then you throw into the mix these freshmen too, guys. I mean, is Notre Dame expecting anything on the field from these freshmen? I mean, there's talent there, but I don't know that there's a lot of guys ahead of them too.
No, I think this, Trev, I think this is a team, when you look at that depth they have, I don't know that there's a need for any of them unless there's injuries. So if any of them play, it's because that guy was too good not to play. The other thing that I think helps them too, Trevor, is because you have so many linebackers that can come down and help you rush the quarterback in nickel situations and third down situations. Preston Zinner, Kingston Villamasa, Jalen Sneed, potentially Madden Faramo. I think that also lessens some of the burden that they have for like a Dom Hulak to have to play if there's injuries. I think there's things you can do on third down where you're replacing an end with a linebacker in order to get more of your linebackers in the field. So I think that takes away some of the potential need for that position too. Now, where you could see something, guys, is if if there's a need where, let's just say they don't have the beef on the edge, against the run, then maybe it's like, hey, we need to activate Chris Burgess earlier than expected, because that guy looks like I was joking with a friend the other day, and he's got a kid on the team, and we were like, when you see Chris Burgess on the sideline in the spring, like at a practice, you almost want to walk to him like, hey, you got a kid out there? Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like, if he's at Irish Invasion watching or helping out, like, hey, which one's your son? You know what I mean? He looks like a grown man. He's massive, and he's got, serious look on his face. It's just, you don't need him to play, but could he help you? Potentially, if there's a need arises, he could help you. But I don't think you're going to need that class to do a whole lot. Between the ends we just talked about, Patel's eventually going to come back, and because you have so many linebackers. I mean, we saw in the spring game where they were going like an odd front with like 3 big defensive linemen. They're just lining up Preston Zinner on the edge like he's a viper and just letting him rush the quarterback. He had 2 sacks or 2 big pressures. He's a 6'3", 240-pound kid. Kingston Villamasa, you could like in a pinch, you could line him up in like a viper type of position on first and second down if you ever got to a real big pinch, if you needed to do that. So I think there's just more of that as the option as opposed to playing one of those freshmen.
All right, well, that's going to do it for our depth chart talk. We've got some more info coming here on the defensive end, so stay tuned. But in the meantime, make sure you hit that like button, that subscribe button, that notification bell, share with your family and friends. And, of course, jump on the boards.irishbreakdown.com for all of your intel needs. Again, big recruiting weekend, and the dominoes are falling. So you want to kind of be over there to see what's happening. And that's the only place you're going to find it, is over on the premium message boards, boards.irishbreakdown.com. So make sure you jump over there. Best benefit money can buy. I'm telling you right now, you want to get over there and you want to check it out. Lots of good information over at boards.irishbreakdown.com. The next part of the show that we're going to talk about, guys, is we're going to talk about some questions from this position as far as the defensive ends are concerned, and what that looks like, and can they take what they've got, turn it into some production and some things like that. So I'm going to throw it down. I'm going to throw it to you, Bryan, to start this thing off. So what are some of your biggest questions at the defensive end position that we're looking to get answered in fall camp and then throughout the season as well?
Yeah, Trev, I think as we kind of work through these kind of 3 big questions, I just kind of want to work a little bit quicker through them, just because it's not so much breaking it down, but just saying these are the things that need to get answered. And I think the first one, and I said it before, is can they turn their potential into production? There's no doubt, guys, this room has the athleticism, the talent, the length, the size, the versatility, the skill set to be one of the 5 to 7 best end rooms in college football this year. But where they are now to where they need to be one of those rooms, there's a pretty big gap between there. The proven production is, I just mentioned this, Bryce Young last season, I believe, let me just pull that up again. I think that I had him, he had more pass rush snaps than Junior, I believe, last season. Yeah, he had 3 more pass rush snaps than Junior Chilamaka, but had 9 fewer pressures. Right, so it's like there's the talent and the potential, but the production wasn't there. Boubacar started to show that production, then he got hurt. Can he get back to that? We've seen some of the big plays that Josh Burnham's made. He's made some big time plays for Notre Dame, but can he take it to that next level? Like, those are all. And then can Logan Thomas give you anything other than just the occasional pass rush? Those are questions we have. We watched the kid pick up a fumble and return it for a touchdown against Louisville. Got overturned, but like, the kids, they wanted to redshirt Logan Thomas. Like, that was the plan last year. They were going to redshirt him. He was 210 pounds, a defensive end, but they didn't redshirt him. Why? Because they're like, dude, this kid's too good for us not to find a way to play. There's no way this kid's going to be a 5-year player. And they played him. So props to them for doing that. But can he become a guy that you can use a little bit more? Can he start to make more plays on the ball? Potential's here. Where they need to be is here. How close do they get to that? That's my first huge question for this unit.
Yeah, going down the list of questions, the next one that I have for this group is, can they actually be more effective in pass rushing situations? Can they turn that potential into, look, you go back and look at the 4 college football semifinal teams, and Notre Dame had the least effective edge rushing group of the 4. And that's something that's going to have to take a step forward if they want to get back to the national championship this upcoming season. They have the potential and the talent to do it, but now it's, you guys know me, I got to see it. I got to see it on the field and have that turn into raw production numbers, consistently being impact players, for sure.
I think the focus on the big moments is key for that, Trev. Abdul Carter just worked the Notre Dame offensive line in the first half.
Yeah.
Jack Sawyer and JT were just, they didn't dominate, but they were very active and just made life tough on Notre Dame at times. And Notre Dame's defensive line and defensive ends especially did not answer the bell the same way in that game. So I think that's a big part of it, is because, as we said, Chris Ash wants to get more from the defensive line without having to blitz. But if this, to Trev, to your point, if this unit doesn't step up, then, now I have to blitz now more, because I can't just sit back and here's the thing too, because the quarterback talent on the opposing teams is so much better than it was a year ago, there's even a greater need now, Trev and Vince, for the ends to be able to get after the quarterback in base downs without having to blitz. It's going to be even more important this season, not just because Chris Ash wants it, because of who you're playing.
Mm-hmm.
And you need to be able to turn this group loose, Vince. We talk about this all the time, Vince. You've heard me say this a million times. And as a defensive coach, you want to blitz because you want to, not because you have to.
Right.
And there's been times the last couple of years when Notre Dame's had to blitz to get after the quarterback, especially last year. Not so much the year before because of how good, Howard was a really good pass rusher, and you had Riley doing his thing, and then you had Javonte Jean-Baptiste was a really good pass rusher. And this year it was different. There just wasn't as much just impact from the end position as there was the year before. A lot of your pass rushing came from your obviously Riley Mills was great at it. Howard Cross was number 3 on your team in pressures. And then in your number 5, your number 7, your number 8, your number 10 guys in total pressures this season, you had 2 guys tied for 10, came from linebackers. And so that just has to be, you just have to get more. In 2023, Notre Dame, according to Pro Football Focus, had 267 pressures, and they had 92 hits on the quarterback in 13 games. Last year, in 16 games, they had 272 total pressures. They had 104 hits on the quarterback, but the consistency with which they impacted the quarterback went down. The production, as far as even the hits on the quarterback, they had 100. What did I say? 104. Well, if you look at the number from the year before, and you say that, give that group the number of the same number of games, they had 113 hits plus sacks on the quarterback. So there's a big drop off in pass rushing production last year overall, linebacker and D-line. I think a lot of the numbers were the linebacker numbers went down quite a bit. The D-line numbers were down, but not as much. And a lot of it's because of the injuries. That number looks different if Boubacar doesn't miss 11 games. You know what I mean? So some of that number doesn't look like that if Patelho doesn't miss 13 games. But that's where they were. The number, it just has to be a more disruptive group.
Yeah.
And that leads to point 3, Trev.
Yeah. It's for all intents and purposes, the next question is going to be, does anyone or do multiple people step up? Some of the things that the other defensive lines that I mentioned in the college football playoff semifinals is they had multiple guys. It wasn't just a guy. Penn State didn't just have Abdul Carter. They also had Denai Dennis Sutton. Ohio State didn't just have Jack Sawyer, or they didn't have just JT Tuimoloau. They had both of them. And so you are going to need, Notre Dame is going to need multiple people to step up and become impact players along their defensive line if they want to be more impactful in those big moments. Because at some point you are going to come across a team that, as good as your secondary is, and I believe Notre Dame to have the best secondary in college football this year, when an opposing quarterback just has all day in the pocket to throw, they're going to make plays on you.
Mm-hmm.
Look at the national championship game. Or even one not as high octane, look at the USC game. Notre Dame could not generate a lot of pressure on Jaden Maeva in the first 3 quarters. Yeah. And then when they did in the fourth quarter, he threw back-to-back pick sixes.
And what was the first one? Was Jack Kaiser's pressure, not a defensive lineman pressure. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then I even think the second pressure was Riley Mills. I don't even think it came off of the edge. And so point being, the edge group has to be more effective, but it can't just be one guy. We've talked about a lot of guys in this segment so far. It can't just be Bryce. It can't just be Josh Burnham. It can't just be Junior Tuialamaka. Ideally, you have multiple impact players across the board.
Here's the question, though, Vince. And I want to get your thoughts on this too, Trevor, is they are going to need multiple guys to be difference makers this year. But because of the unique nature of their depth chart, it doesn't necessarily have to be an Abdul Carter, Deni Dennis Sutton situation.
Right. Sure.
Right. Or, it could be in this game, it's Bryce and Boubacar. In this game, it's Burnham and Boubacar. In this game, it's Botelho and Cole Mullins. In this game, it's Logan Tom. I mean, it just – the point is, and this is the concern I have, and that's why it's a question mark, is because you don't have a guy that's proven to be that guy, and it's much less a second guy, then it's you run the risk of, okay, but what if it's one of those games where nobody steps up? And that's the concern, is there's going to be some games where Josh Burnham's like, that's the Josh Burnham that I know we're going to see. And there's going to be games where Bryce looks like that, and Boubacar looks like that, and Botelho looks like that, and Junior looks like that, and Logan looks like that. But how many in a game, and are there games where nobody steps up? That's the concern of having, a lot of depth, but nobody that stepped up as the guy. And so I think, and this is what I want to hear from you guys, I think that's why you need at least one guy to kind of have that breakout season where he's consistently really good, because then that raises the odds that there's going to be a second guy from this other group of players to step up each week. And so I think they're in a unique situation where if Deni Dennis Sutton and Abdul Carter weren't taking over games, then Penn State was going to have trouble getting after the quarterback. And if you take Abdul Carter off that lineup, that's a much different team. That's the reality. Whereas Notre Dame is like, you could take these two guys off the field and you still have Junior Tuialamaka and Josh Burnham and Bryce Young and Logan Thomas, But I still think your odds of getting the kind of edge play you need are increased if one guy steps up, because I think I agree with your point, Trevor, that it can't just be a guy, because good teams are going to be able to say, well, we're just going to game plan to stop that guy, like Notre Dame had happen to them in 2022 with Isaiah Foskey. We're just going to stop Foskey, and if we stop Foskey, then anybody else can get after quarterback. And so, and some teams did that to Javonte Jean-Baptiste in 2023 because they're like, well, we're going to make your Vipers beat us, and they couldn't do it. So my thing is, yes, it needs to be two, but I don't know that it needs to be the same two. So do you guys agree or disagree that they only truly need one guy to really have that breakout season? Because then you're going to have a better chance of a second guy, and it could be a different guy each week, stepping up to make sure that you're going to have, and sometimes it might be 3, might be 4 in a game, but you're going to need one guy to kind of have that breakout season. Agree or disagree with that sentiment?
Well, it's the odds, it's math, it's all of those different things. If you've got one constant, but you need 2 each game, and you got one that is going to be there, the odds are good that you're going to be able to at least get one guy to approach that level, if not others, like you just said, right? So from an odds standpoint, then yeah, absolutely, I agree with you. Now, who's that going to be? I think that's a legitimate question right now. I could, you can place your bets on who it's going to be, and I think you get better odds with certain guys and certain things, and the ceiling and the floor and all of those different things that we've been talking about for this show. I think that's a debate to be had, but I think your odds are increasingly better if you get one guy that's going to show up to work every single day and be that guy, and then he can bring along whoever else wants to be there for each game. I think your odds are exponentially better, and the odds of this group performing at a higher level are exponentially better if that's the case. And I think there's enough talent in this room where you can find that one guy to be the dude every single game. And there's also enough talent where it can vary each game for that second guy. Absolutely. I think that is probably your best bet when looking at this room and looking at this group and how they're going to perform on a game-to-game basis. I think they need that one guy from a leadership standpoint, from a production standpoint, from a, hey guys, follow me, I know the way. Like, you kind of need that one guy. I don't want it to be a grab bag every single game. You don't know which two guys are going to step up. I want some solidarity, some solidification, I guess is the word I was looking for. A solidification of that one spot. And then, hey man, who wants to step up with me this game? And let's roll.
Yeah. We all see that very much the same. Again, I'm going to draw an inference back to the receiving core. Why was Malachi Field such a big pickup? Because you needed that one guy that you knew week in and week out could impact the passing game. But you also have a smattering of other talent in that room. Jaden Greathouse, Jordan Faison, Will Pauling. List goes on and on. It's the same with the defensive end group. But you need that guy to emerge. Ideally, at the bare minimum, it is kind of a flavor of the week. I don't want to say ideally, but at the floor of this group is it's a flavor of the week. Maybe this week it's a Boubacar week, and this week it's a Bryce Young week. But in that, the foundation is there. Somewhere in between there, you have to have that one guy that you always rely on. Yeah, so I agree.
I don't know. Could they go through the season and have a great edge situation and not one guy is the consistent great player? It's possible. Like there's enough depth here where it's possible. It just, like you said, Vince, percentage-wise, the math can get tough because there's the odds that there's those weeks where if nobody's consistently good, then you run into the greater chances of those weeks where nobody's good.
Mm-hmm.
Where when you at least have that one guy, you know he's at least going to give you something, and then maybe that helps the other guys. So that's where. So I don't know that I'm good. I think all of us are saying the same thing. There's a chance that they could do it this way. It's just a lot harder.
Yeah, no, for sure.
It's a lot harder. Great points.
I think we are going to find out fairly early, kind of where this group is trending, because, when we talk about matchups and we look at, where, what those best matchups of the year are going to be and things like that.
Most telling.
Yeah.
Like the most, the matchups that are going to tell us, okay, this group is or isn't what we think it's going to be.
Right. You're talking week 1 and game 2. So week 1, week 3, but game 1, game 2, in Miami and Texas A&M. I mean, we're going to find out a lot about this unit. I'll just say that much, Bryan.
I agree. I think there's 2 stretches of the season, and the second stretch I'll talk about after we're done with this one. But the most important one is your first 2 games. And it's not even that they need to who that star is going to emerge in game 1 to be nice. I mean, in 2012, we got an idea in game 1 that Stephon Tuitt was a different cat than he was here before. And I'm not even talking about the fumble return for a touchdown. Like that could be anybody. Just pick up the ball and run.
Right.
I'm talking about just the dominance he showed on the edge, snap after snap after snap against Navy. That's what I'm referring to. It could happen in games 1 and 2, but as a unit, this group has to be very good because there's no doubt the 2 best lines you're going to play, Trevor, this year are going to be in games 1 and game 2, most likely. But I'd be shocked if there's anybody else. And you're facing 2 of the better tackles in the country. I mean, the tackle rotation is so good that Trey Zune was on our second team preseason all-opponent squad. I think Trey Zune was getting preseason All-America rankings, I believe. I'm looking at Athlon right now, and I thought that they had Trey Zune on their third team. I could be wrong on that, but that's how loaded this offensive line room is, guys, is that, they're going to be playing some teams this year, some players this year that are considered among the best in the country. And Athlon's got Francis Maunoa on their first team All-American squad. And then on the second team All-American squad, they have Cage Casey, who's in game 5, and then you've got Trey Zune from Texas A&M, who I think is a big time player. I don't have my Lindy's here. Actually, I do have my Lindy's because I believe he was ranked among the top tackles returning in college football by Lindy's. But you're going to know the tackle rotation, and then the Crownover kid for Texas A&M is a massive kid. And the kid that's playing left tackle for Miami, he was very inconsistent last year, but when he was on, he's pretty good. And he's another massive kid. So you're going to have your hands full in games 1 and game 2. And if you want to help your football team not have to have your offense win it for you in games 1 and 2 with a new quarterback, a big part of that's going to be, can you get your offensive line or your defensive ends to create problems for the opposing offensive lines? That's going to be a big part of the success, guys.
Well, and to put numbers to what you're talking about, Bryan, it is they are by far the 2 best offensive lines they will face in the regular season. Now, depending on who they get matched up in the postseason, who knows? But I've been putting together some numbers for an offensive lineman article that I'm going to have coming out here soon. And Texas A&M, they combine from last season. They have 3,629 snaps played in between them just in 2024, and they have 120 career starts. Miami had 3,812 snaps played amongst their 5 starters in 2024 and had 86 career starts. Of those, the tackles for them, left tackle at Miami right now is supposed to be Markel Bell. He started last season. Jalen Rivers took over. Rivers is now with the Cincinnati Bengals.
They kind of both played.
Yeah. Yep. He had 5 starts last season, and then Francis Maianoa had 13. And then at Texas A&M, Trey Zune had 13 starts, and Demetrius Crownover had 13 starts. So
they also have Ruben Fothery in that rotation, who's also started games as their number 3 tackle has started, I think, double-digit games as well, Trev, in his career. He's not even starting for them at tackle. He was a highly ranked recruit coming out.
Yep, and those start numbers that I was listing off were just in 2024.
Right.
So, we will not have to wait long to see how effective Notre Dame's defensive ends will be in, over the course of the season. Now, I'm also not naive to the fact that there can be improvement, but in terms of measuring, you hold the Miami matchup and the Texas A&M matchup with a little bit more weight than what you will how they look against Stanford.
Yeah, and I don't know, guys, that they need to be like peak form in games 1 and 2, because I don't expect the lines for the other team to necessarily be peak form in game. But you've got to hold your own, and you've got to be able to make some plays. I don't need Boubacar Traore to look like, Miami of Ohio version of Boubacar in game 1. I don't expect him to do that. I don't need Bryce Young to look like a future number 1 overall draft pick, like the question we got yesterday in the Buy So Hold in game 1. But they've got to at least be able to make some plays and hold their own, because the thing about these tackles, guys, is they're not small. That's the thing, is these tackles for these 2 teams are not only talented, but they're huge. And so they're going to have to be prepared for that. I mean, you just look at the Miami game, since that's game 1, and Francis Maianoa is I'm pulling it up right now. 6'6", 315 as a true sophomore is what he was last year. And then Markel Bell is listed at 6'9", 340. Like, they're big kids. They're not small. And you're going to have your hands full, and Demetrius Crownover is 6'7", 340 for Texas A&M. Trey Zune is 6'7", 320. So you're going to have your hands full right away. And if the DNs on the flip side, so I'm kind of like, hey, they don't need to look like they got Lawrence Taylor's across the line in game 1. Got to hold your own. Got to be able to make some plays. But here's the thing: if they win those battles, then it's like, okay, this is a group of ends that people are going to have to be concerned about the rest of the year. And I think what that would do for them, Trev, is if they are able to kind of win those matchups against those tackle tandems, now every team has to prepare differently for Notre Dame than they have. Where teams have been so focused in the last 2 years on stopping Notre Dame up the middle because their D tackles are so good at rushing the quarterback and they blitz so much right up the middle. Now, if all of a sudden, if you don't have a plan to stop their ends, they're going to eat you alive. Then you have to defend. You have to game plan your protection scheme way different for Notre Dame, and that's going to make their blitzes so much more effective when they do blitz. So those first 2 games are going to be major statement games, and then the second stretch for me, guys, is going to be, let's see how they develop. You've got Purdue, you've got Arkansas, a couple games there, but then you go into your next stretch, and you're getting into sort of what I think is going to be the next stretch that really is going to tell us, and that's Boise, NC State, and USC. So that gets us kind of through October, September, and October. If they haven't broken out by then I just kind of think it's just not necessarily going to be there. You're going to play Cage Casey in game 5. Then NC State and USC are teams that have good offensive lines, but not elite offensive lines. That's when you should start taking over games. And that's what gets me a little fired up about what they can be.
All right, gentlemen, let's talk about.
Let's say you, Vince. What are your thoughts on that? Like I love how you're emceeing all this, but I also value your football opinions.
No, I know you do.
And I'm curious, kind of like, what's the sign where you say, okay, if they haven't shown it by now, maybe they're just going to be that same unit?
Well, the first 2 games are critical. I mean, because those are 2 of the biggest games that Notre Dame's going to have all season. And I know that we're not expecting everybody to be at top form and all of that, but you still got to come out when the lights are the brightest, and they're going to be the 2 of the brightest lights of the season. And that's when you need your guys to play. And, can they get better as the year goes on? Of course. But you can't start the season 0-2 and reach the goals that you want for this team. And so they're going to have to make the quarterbacks for Miami and Texas A&M uncomfortable. They're going to have to. And I'm not saying they got to come out and they got to get 5 sacks a game and things like that, but they better get some pressures and some hurries, and they better make those guys uncomfortable, and they better speed the clock up for those quarterbacks so that the Trevor, what you said was one of the best secondaries in the country, the best secondary in the country, can then go make some plays on balls in the air. Like, that's what has to happen in week 1 and week 3, game 1, game 2. They have to do that. Okay. That's where I'm at. I have some high expectations for these defensive ends. I really do. And I know I don't want to, get too excited or get, put the cart before the horse or any of those analogies or cliches that you want to use, but they're going to have to come to play those first 2 games. They're going to have to, if Notre Dame is going to have the success that we think that they should have. Because again, you can't go 0-2 and then have some of the plans that this team has. Okay. Plain and simple. So I fully expect them to get better as the season goes on, just like I do any other position group or any other team. But I think we're going to have to see some things in the first 2 games. They're going to have to make those quarterbacks uncomfortable, guys. They're just absolutely going to have to do that. And then that allows the rest of the defense to make plays. So that's where I'm at. They need to make some plays in those first 2 games. Have to. And I don't care who it is. We've talked about the depth on this team. I don't care who it is. I just want.
So for you guys, it's if they don't play well those first 2 games, I don't really care what happens the rest of the regular season because they're not going to play anybody on that level. We don't really have another gauge for them to see if they can play championship football until we get to the postseason. Not that we don't care, but there's going to be some uncertainty about are they truly dominant until we get to the postseason because there's no other offensive lines really except ironically, Boise State that can really present that much of a challenge. Because that's where I am. Is like if they play just kind of okay those 2 games, but then go out there and just make Casey just like regret coming back for another season, like okay, they've learned from it because it is still kind of a young group, and I'm not trying to like make excuse for it because I agree they need to play well in that game. I just don't need them to look like world beaters in the first game, but they've got to step up and hold their own.
100%.
Then I expect them to start dominating in that NC State USC stretch.
Absolutely.
That's kind of where I'm coming from. But if 100%. They get whipped in those first 2 games,
that's a problem.
I don't really care what they do against NC State and Boston College and Pitt. It's the next gauge is going to be, what are they going to be able to do against the best teams on the schedule? That's going to be the key.
Yeah, that's the whole point of what I was saying. I completely agree. It's like you don't have to be. I don't need a bunch of Abdul Carters out there in the first 2 games.
It'd be nice.
It'd be great. I'm not gonna be like, guys, can we settle down a little bit? Like you're getting too many sacks. Like I'm not gonna be like that. But they need to make some plays. They need to keep the quarterback off balance, make him speed up his progressions. Some things like that. That's what needs to happen.
Carson Beck sit in the pocket and be comfortable.
Right, exactly.
And I don't know that you have the same type of D tackles. And this other thing, too, you don't have the D tackles you had last year.
Correct.
You've got good D tackles, but I think this group is more kind of like run stoppers than they were passers. Now, Jared Dawson kind of gives you, I think, even more than what Howard Cross gave you last year as a pass rusher. But can Armo Mukum and Jason Onye give you what Riley Mills gave you? I don't know the answer to that, especially on first and second down. That's also why you need to play better in those first two games. I'm simply saying, like, I don't want to put too much on it to where if they don't dominate in the first two games, and because playing well in those two games is going to look a lot different than playing well against Purdue. And that's
playing well in those two games need to be relative to where they're at that point in the season. I'm not expecting Bryce to have 3 sacks and then Boubacar to have 3 sacks and then Josh Burnham to have a sack and then Junior Tuialamaka to have 6 hurries. Like, it's, again, wouldn't be upset about it. I would not be upset if it was a bunch of Abdul Carters out there. You can give me Abdul Carter, Cabdul Arter, Carter Abdul. I don't care who you give me. Paul Abdul. You can give me any one of the Abduls.
Paul Abdul. Wow.
But look, man, I would not be upset in the slightest if that's what it looked like. But, Brian, you're 100% correct. As long as it looks good relative to that mark in the season, lay the foundation to where it's like, okay, you can see where the progression is going to come in. But if they just get whipped in the first game, man.
Yep. Yeah, that's the thing. You can't get whipped. I love it. That's the key. You just can't get whipped. Even if Paul Abdul's out there doing her thing, you know what I mean?
Look, man.
Like, it's all good. It's all good, man. I love it. I love it. But like we saw what this unit can look like against Georgia, but then we saw against Penn State and Ohio State what can happen to your defense if they're not getting that kind of pressure.
100%.
And that's the perfect dichotomy of why they have to be able to play well to some degree of playing well in those two games. No doubt about it. Those are the telling matchups for us.
Yes, no question. No question. And so kind of bouncing off of what those matchups are like and what Notre Dame can do against those matchups, to you guys, Trevor, and I'll let you kick this one off, what constitutes a successful season for this position group? So last season, they had 85 total pressures, 13 sacks, 15 hits on the quarterback, 57 hurries, from a numbers standpoint. So what constitutes a successful season? It could be stats. It could be, team record. It could be whatever direction you want to go with this. Trevor, what to you constitutes a successful season for the defensive ends?
Yeah, numbers I'll get to in a second. First and foremost, it comes back to what we've talked about really the first 2 hours of the show is the level of consistency has to be better week over week. That will constitute a successful season for me. It can't be, 1 week you got Josh Burnham intercepting a pitch on an option play, and you have weeks where, Junior Tuialamaka looks borderline unguardable. You have some plays where Bryce Young just looks like an unstoppable force. Then you might have some games where it's like, I remember them on the field. I think they were there. You got to find some level of consistency. That will be mark number 1 of a good season, where every single week on Thursdays, us three or whoever it is on the Keys to Victory show, we can kind of just start talking about the edge group as a constant, and they just kind of have to do what they did for the last 4 weeks, is continue to dominate, hold the edge, set the edge, and generate a pass rush. So that's first and foremost. Second, putting numbers behind it. Over the course of a 16-game season, that edge group, I don't hate 85 total pressures, but again, it's the lapses in between those numbers when it happened is the bigger issue for me overall. Yeah. And then for sacks and hits on the quarterback, I'll wait for my bold prediction to give what I want those numbers.
Oh, I like it. You're just dangling it out there for everybody. The carrot, it's dangling out there. What about you, Brian? What's your definition of success for this group?
I just think it's becoming a focal point of the defense. And I mean, consistency is always key to success for anybody. I mean, that's always an important part of evaluating your football team, is saying, hey, look, just week after week, we're a really good football team. And everybody has a game here, a game there. That's not what I'm talking about. But it's just about the level of consistency that each week we're impactful players. I think the other part of it, too, is can they be impactful in every phase of the game? A lot of times when we talk about defensive ends, a lot of the focus comes down to the defensive, the pass rush, right? Like they had X number of sacks, so they must have played well, right? Like, yeah, they had X number of sacks, but like they got ran on every time the team wanted to run on them, so that they didn't get as many sacks in this game because the team was constantly in 2nd and 3 and 3rd and 1. So they weren't able to get the same kind of pressures in that game as maybe they would have liked to. Those are things you look at and say, I need to see more consistency in production from this group in all phases of the game. Be better setting the edge in the run game. Be more effective, making tackles for loss in the run game. And that's where Josh Burnham actually shined, because I think Josh only had 1.5 sacks last year. What did Burnham have sacks-wise? So he had 2. So he's tied for second on the team in tackles for loss. He had 4.5 stops in the run game behind the line. I want to see more of that. And that's what made – you look at, for example, the season that Javonte Jean-Baptiste had 2 years ago. He had 5 sacks, which is good, but he also had 10.5 tackles for loss. And that's the kind of – I want to see more of that run game production as well, on top of improving in the pass rush. So those are the things to me, is just do it week after week. That's going to be the key. If you can do that, you got a chance to be pretty good football team.
Yeah.
Or pretty good unit.
Yeah. The only thing I'll add to that, because I think you guys make really good points, I think it is about consistency and that. I want to go back to what we were talking about earlier about one guy stepping up and being the man, and then allowing the other guys to step up and be that second guy, depending on who it is, in what game and whatever, because of the depth. But I need to see that. I need to see one guy. I need to see one guy be that guy. And to be honest with you, I don't care who it is. I can make some predictions as to who it might be and things like that, but the definition of a successful season, I want to see one guy step up and be the man, and then kind of bring those guys along with them. So that's a definition of success for me, in addition to what you guys said about consistency and, and all of that, because I think that's absolutely accurate. But I want to see one guy be the man, and that would be successful for me. So let's spin this forward, because Trevor already dangled the carrot out there of some bold predictions. And so since you dangled it, I'm going to let you go first, Trevor. What bold predictions for the group, man? Where are you at here?
Yeah, I got the defensive end unit accounting for 12 more sacks than what they did last season. Yeah.
Okay.
So
25?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. Bold.
You asked for bold. The
Bold.
man's delivering. The man is
Bold.
delivering. I dig it.
Bold. And here's why. Part 1, my quarterback bold prediction was kind of lame, so I wanted to make up for it.
You're going to complete forward passes.
They're gonna name a starter, and so so I was like, all right, let's go bold with this one. But I did crunch some numbers with it, and so I was thinking about this. I don't think you're going to get the sack production numbers that you got up the middle last season with Riley Mills having what he had. I believe he was at. Let me look. Riley Mills had 7.5 sacks. Howard Cross had 4, so 11.5 up the middle. Just between those two guys. I think some of that, not all of it, because I do believe defensive tackles this season for Notre Dame will still account for some, just not 11. So that swayed into my decision a little bit. I also I'm taking into account some of the projection of what Boubacar Traore was able to do before he got injured. We're talking about a guy who had 5 tackles for loss and didn't play after the first half of the Louisville game.
Right.
And so
played 9 snaps that game, something like that, a very low number of snaps.
Mm-hmm. I think if Bryce Young takes the natural trajectory that he does, and I'm not talking, he doesn't have to have some explosive season. I use Isaiah Foskey as kind of a gauge here. Isaiah Foskey went from having 0 to 4.5. If Bryce Young can go from 1.5 to 6, I don't see Josh Burnham ending this season with, what did he have last year? Was it 2? I don't see him ending the season with 2. I think Logan Thomas is going to be used a little bit more. But really, for all the guys that we talked about today, that averages out to 4 sacks a player. And that's before Jordan Botelho comes back. And that's assuming that Christopher Burgess doesn't play. Now, there's going to be here's what makes it bold. What's his name? Cole Mullins has yet to play a snap at defensive end in a live game, and he's also accounting for 4 of those sacks, averaging out. But if it's a situation where, say, Bryce Young ends with 6, 6.5, Cole Mullins doesn't have to have 4. Cole Mullins has 2.5. And so that's kind of where I got the 25 number. So it's bold, but I'm really high on this group.
I dig it, Vince. I dig it.
Hey, I'm gonna give mine because it kind of goes a little bit off of where Trevor is, and then I'll throw it to you, Bryan, to seal up the bold predictions. I am kind of on the same wavelength as Trevor. I wasn't going to go 25. I was going to go more individual. So I said earlier about my idea of success is that one guy needs to step up and be the man. I think that's going to be Bryce Young. I know you guys are tempering the expectations a little bit with what you're saying, and I don't have any problem with that whatsoever. You want a natural progression of where he's going to be and all of those things, but this is why I'm taking it a bold prediction. I think he's going to be that guy who is the consistent contributor, the man, and I think he gets 10 sacks this season. I think he gets double digits. And the record's 13.5. I'm not predicting anything like that. I'm saying he gets double digits. I'm saying he gets 10.
Vince is going full hype mode today.
Full hype mode, all the way in. I'm all the way in on Bryce Young.
I thought Vince would be like, I'm on the same line as Trevor. I'm going 26.
Yeah, I'll see your 25.
And I'll raise you.
What was the thing where what was it? Was it
Name that tune?
Bob Barker? No, Bob
Oh,
Barker.
yeah, Price is Right.
Price is Right. It's
Yeah.
like,
Brian's $1, Bob.
Yeah, exactly. It's like I'll see your 25 and I'll raise you 26. It's like, okay, man, that's Super Bowl, dude. Way to get after it.
Hey, I'm in the neighborhood.
Kind of to set the stage for my bold prediction, guys. I think we have to go back to think about the Marcus Freeman said something, and when he hired Al Golden, that I think we need to remember as we're getting ready to think about what production is going to look like, and maybe some of the comments that we've seen about what Chris Ash wants to do defensively, and some of the different maybe adjustments that we're going to see. And that is that in Marcus Freeman's 1 year as a defensive coordinator, we saw far more production from the defensive line than we saw in 2022, the first year under Al Golden. Now, why does that matter? Well, you had the same players. You literally had the same exact players in 2021 compared to 2022. You had Foskey, Justin Adamiola, you had Riley Mills. The only guy you lost was Myron Tungavaloa-Mosa. And you had Jordan Patelho. It was the same guys. And you went out there and saw a bit of a drop in sack production. And the sack production from the ends decreased every year under Al Golden, even with the team playing 3 more games than they played the year before. They went from, in his 3 years, they went from 18.5 to 14 to 13. And I don't think that's just about the players. I think that's also how they're used. So I kind of like where you guys are at. My bold prediction was going to look at 2 different statistics. And my bold prediction is that the minimum that we're going to see from the defensive line this season is I think we're going to see. Now, I'm projecting them to play at least 15 games. So that's part of it. But I think it's going to be 40 tackles for loss combined. And Trev, I actually had 25 sacks was my number. Yeah. So that's the minimum we're going to see from the defensive end in both areas. Because like I said, part of my thing is I need to see more production in all phases of the game. And it's not so much that like, oh, the player's going to take a huge jump and that's the only reason why. It's they're going to improve, but we're also going to see they're going to be used differently. Like somebody in the chat said different D-line coaches as well. I don't think that has anything to do with it. I think it's about how they're used and how Al Golden wanted the defensive ends to play the game. They were kind of contained. You got to play contain, so we're going to blitz up the middle and you got to clean it up, make sure that guy doesn't get out of the pocket, as opposed to, hey, we're going to let you get after it. And so I think that is the reason why. It's a combination of improvement from the players, and then also they're going to be used more effectively to be more playmakers than they have been. And it's not that Al Golden did something wrong. It worked. His system worked. It's just that I think Chris Ash is going to allow them to be more of the controllers of the game, where with Al Golden, it was the linebackers and the D tackles controlled the game. Now I think you're going to ask the edge players to do even more of that. So that's kind of where I'm at. Now, again, that's over the course of minimum 15 games. That's not a regular season bold prediction, but that's where I'm at with this. I think now, could it happen in the regular season? Yeah, it could. If Boubacar's the guy we think can be, and he's healthy, if Bryce Young has the kind of breakout that Vince is talking about, if Burnham takes the jump we think he's capable of, and Junior, keep doing what you're doing. And then Logan Thomas has just a normal freshman to sophomore year jump, I could see that production in the regular season. I'm not willing to predict it because that's a 13 and 16 games to 25 and 12. Like, that's a bold prediction. Like, that's a little too bold for my taste. But I would say by this going into the semifinals, I could see those numbers being there. That's my bold prediction.
There we go.
Yeah.
All right, gentlemen, that is going to do it for our defensive end talk and just rolling right through and giving our predictions and all the fun that comes with that. We've got more, so don't go anywhere. But in the meantime, make sure you hit that like button, that subscribe button, that notification bell. Share with your family and friends. Of course, jump on the boards.irishbreakdown.com. All kinds of good intel over there and some great discussions happening. But you won't know about it unless you are a member of the premium board. So you definitely want to get over there and check that out. Also, irishbreakdown.com for all kinds of good written content as well. You definitely want to hit that up too. So boards.irishbreakdown.com. Check it out. Give us a like. Give us a subscribe. Give us all the fun stuff. We really appreciate it. It helps us out and allows us to do what we do for you guys every single day and allows us to do the YouTube thing and all of those different things. So make sure you kind of support the channel, support us over there as well. And again, jump on the boards.irishbreakdown.com. The next thing we are going to talk about, gentlemen, is we are going to rank our top quarterbacks in college football going into the 25 season. And this is going to be interesting because I've already gotten a sneak peek at Bryan and Trevor's list here, and there are some differences. I'll just say that there are some differences that we will discuss and we will talk about, and we're gonna have some fun with this. But there's it's an interesting year for quarterback, Bryan, because there's just not a lot of returning production. There's a lot of new faces on the map. I'll just put it that way. So it's a very interesting year, Bryan, for quarterback. So why don't you set us up for kind of where we're going to be here with this list?
It was one of the harder quarterback years for me. Now, look, you never always get it right. You never go into season like, okay, this is my preseason prediction and this is what I had postseason. Because more likely than not, if your ranking is the same postseason as it was preseason, you're just kind of saying like, okay, I'm just going to go with what I said so I can look like I know what I'm talking about. Right? There's always guys that break out and perform well and do things that you don't expect to happen. But but there's at least some level of conviction about where you stand going into the season. And I had a much tougher time with that this year. And it's, part of it's the portal and things like that. But the other part of it is it's not so much the lack of proven production. Vince, there is that at like the best schools, there's a lack of proven production. There's a lot of quarterbacks coming back in college football, but it's more so like the best talents in college football are some of the least proven guys on this list. And so when we did our ranking, what I said in the criteria is you can pick anybody. This is a projection of the season in any way that you want to take it. So, my advice to Trev was if you want to completely project a guy that's never thrown a pass into the top 10, go for it. I'm not, because I want it to be broad in how you look at it. So you won't see me put CJ Carr in my list. Now we will talk about CJ Carr at the end, but you won't see me have CJ Carr on my list. You won't have me have Bryce Underwood on my list because I've never seen those guys throw a pass. It's kind of impossible for me to project them into being top 10. There's guys capable of it. We'll kind of have a who we also considered conversation at the end, but I just needed to see some level of I've seen it from this guy. And there's a difference, for example, between me saying, look, I think Arch Manning has a lot to prove, and still saying, but I saw the kid throw for almost 1,000 yards last year, start 2 football games, and then, make plays with his legs. That's different than saying, I haven't seen Bryce Underwood play a snap outside of what he did in high school, or CJ Carr's not thrown. I haven't seen CJ Carr throw a pass in a real football game since he was at Salient High School in Michigan, playing against Bryce Underwood, as actually in his last game. So that's kind of where I'm at, but we can take it any way we want because it is a projection of what we think who the best quarterbacks will be. It's not a gauge of who they are right now.
Right.
It's not here's the most proven top 10 now. We are projecting how we think these guys are going to play into the season. And Trev said to me before the show, dude, I changed my top 10 like 5 times. And I was like, same. And we both had a guy in our top 10 that we initially submitted and then took that guy out. It was the same guy. And we've had him in, and then we're like, no, I'm not comfortable with it because, again, there's so much uncertainty. I think this guy could be there. I had about 8 or 9 guys. I'm like, I could see this guy being in the top 10.
Yep.
And it was tough. So for me, my list, guys, I put a lot into. I have a lot more confidence in some of the run throw guys this year than I do some of just the drop back guys this year. And my list will reflect that. But yeah, Trev, it was a challenge. And you and I usually, when we do lists, we laugh because we're very similar.
Yeah.
We only had 5 of the same guys.
Yeah. To your point, this was a very, very tough, difficult list for me to put together because, one, it's so open, which is also what makes it fun, right? We don't want everything to be, which is why I'm happy this isn't a list of, all right, who's the top 10 entering the season, because I think our list would look relatively similar, if not identical, if it was entering into this season. So to give you guys a background, Bryan explained to you guys how he built his list. Mine was a little bit different because we could take it however we wanted. I put a lot of emphasis into experience coming into the season because it's going to play into my second point of what each quarterback is going to mean for the success of their team and the projection of how far they can take that program. And yes, football's a team sport. It's not just about the quarterback. The quarterback gets a lot of attention. And as we know, they will play a big part in how good or how bad the team may be week over week. Prime example is Jalen Milroe was a pretty competent quarterback as a thrower in 2023. They made the playoffs. Last season, he digressed, and they didn't make the playoffs. But they also had tools like Ryan Williams. So I took things like that into account for me because it's a lot of different ingredients there. But just so you guys have a background of who all is on my list, but because of that criteria, it was really hard for me to leave off some of the people that I left off. And it'll make more sense when you hear who's not on my list as this begins to unfold. But yeah, this was a difficult one to put together, man. It was fun, though.
All right, so we're going to jump into this thing, and we're just going to talk about it as we go. We're going to go 10 up, right? We're going to start with Bryan. Then we're going to go to Trevor. We're going to kind of go back and – well, you're going to do your bottom
We'll do 6 to 10.
I mean. Yep.
Yeah, and then I'll do my 6 to 10. Then Trevor will do his. Then I'll give my 5 to 1. Trevor will do his 5 to 1, and then we'll then talk about sort of some of the other players not on the list, why certain guys, and then Vince, I know you're going to pepper us with some questions about our list, which is Vince was like, "Hey, I don't want to do a ranking. I just want to bust your guys' chops about it." He didn't quite say it like that, but that was what he inferred.
Yeah,
that's what he texted me outside of the group chat. It was crazy.
I figured.
I just want to give you guys a hard time for your list. Yeah. I'm not willing to put my list out there. Yeah. I just want to bust your guys' chops.
Well, the best part about that is there's no way your list can be wrong then.
That's correct. I believe me.
Yes.
I've been married long enough.
At the end of the year, you're like, well, if I would have done a list, I would have definitely had that guy on there.
I had plans to make a list.
Yes.
Oh, man.
In my mental list, he was definitely number
That's
one.
Right. The list you can't see, only me.
That's right.
But no, anyway, so it's gonna be very interesting because there's going to be a lot of discrepancy at your bottom half of both of your lists, right? Yeah. The top half is just kind of like different order, more or less.
To a degree, we have one guy that we have 4 of our 5 are the same guys, but in different order.
Right. Yeah.
But there's 3 of our 5 because you have. I'm looking at this list. No, it's 4 of the 5. It's just we have one guy very different. Now, one of his in his top 5. He has a guy in his top 5. I don't have my top 10.
Right.
One of my top 5s is in his top 10. So we're going to talk about that. And it's going to be
all right. So without further ado, Bryan, this is the bottom half of your top 10. So this is 10 through 6. Kind of give us your 5 guys here at the bottom half of your top 10 and some reasoning as to why.
What I'm trying to figure out is how the triple option hater is the only guy giving love to Blake Horvath.
I'm shocked.
I am wanting to know what's going on with my people in this. Vince, you should be ashamed of yourself because you played in the triple option in high school. I did. So, you should be the guy that's out here pounding the table being like, Trevor, I don't know that we can still be friends because you don't have a triple option quarterback in your top 10. But in all seriousness, guys, I genuinely believe that Blake Horvath is one of the 10 best quarterbacks in college football. This has nothing to do with the NFL draft for me. It's nothing. It's about being an impact player in college football. And when I look at Blake Horvath, I see a guy that's a difference maker. And Trev, you made a point too earlier that I thought was a very good point is, part of being a big time quarterback is as opposed to a system quarterback is if you go down and the next guy comes in and does the same exact thing, then you're kind of a product of the system. Are you an elevator? Are you a guy that makes the people around you better? And when you go look at the Navy offense when he didn't play or was banged up and not his normal self, they were a completely different team. And then when he got healthy again against Army and then against Oklahoma, back to looking like they were most of the year. And so he's a difference maker, guys. You look at the production, 1,246 yards rushing, 1,353 yards passing, 30 total touchdowns in only 12 games, only threw 4 picks, was a 57.6% passer last season, so very efficient. I think Blake Horvath is an outstanding quarterback and in my opinion, one of the 10 toughest quarterbacks to game plan for. He obviously is a guy that produces a lot of touchdowns, and he's just a guy that, to me, that Navy team is way better last year because of him. A lot of the guys around him, same dudes they had the year before. But when you put him in that lineup and he's now the guy, it was a very different football team than what you're going to see. It's kind of hard to say, like, well, if he played for so-and-so because he runs a different offense. But it's not a coincidence that they went from just really the mediocre offense they were. They almost doubled their points per game output last year. They went from 17.7 to 31. And if he doesn't miss those games and you look at their point production in those games, they're close to doubling their yardage output. And I know they had a new OC, but I've said this a million times, Vince, and this is the one thing you and I agree on. If you don't have a really good quarterback in the triple option, you won't have a really good triple option quarterback. Correct. And Blake Horvath is absolutely that guy for me. So he's number 10 for me.
We've seen it enough, Bryan, just to your point about triple option. I mean, if you better have a quarterback because the quarterback can make everybody else so much better. I mean, because he's the one making the decisions about who gets the ball and why. And so if you don't have a quarterback that can make that happen, not only making the decisions, but then also obviously being an athlete and being able to throw the ball a little bit doesn't hurt. But if you don't have that quarterback that's literally pulling the trigger and doing the different things, the triple option is useless. It's useless because you're guessing. You're guessing.
That's why Navy was even under Coach Niumatalolo, they were just, this is why their offense went like this a lot.
Right.
Because when they had, Ricky, what was his name?
Ricky,
oh, goodness gracious. The kid they had in 2010. I cannot believe I'm forgetting his name. It was just give me a second. I'm going to pull it up. But then you obviously had Malcolm Price. You had Will Worth, the kid they had in 2016, Ricky Dobbs. And then in the years where, like, they didn't have a guy like that, you remember, like, the couple years under Ricky Dobbs, they were really good. And then they had Chris Proctor at quarterback, and he was not Ricky Dobbs. And their offense struggled a little bit. The next year was year one of Keenan Reynolds, and they were pretty good, but he was still young. And then all of a sudden you get into, like, prime Keenan Reynolds, and Navy all of a sudden starts winning a bunch more games, and they're a much more impactful offense. And then, of course, you get his last year of Keenan Reynolds. Navy goes 11-2 and finish in the top 25. And Keenan Reynolds is an absolute monster. And I believe that Keenan Reynolds was a top 10 Heisman Trophy winner. And we talk about how great Keenan Reynolds was. Keenan Reynolds in 13 games had 1,200 passing yards, 13 plus 100 rushing yards, and accounted for 32 touchdowns in 12 games. If you actually look at the per game production, Blake Horvath was more productive on a per game basis, yards and touchdowns, than what Keenan Reynolds was in his big year at Navy. And that's why he's in my top 10. Number 9 for me is Garrett Nussmeier. This is a guy on my list that has the most room to rise. And the reason that I have Garrett Nussmeier 9 is a lot of people are going to focus on the yards. They're going to focus on, hey, he threw for over 4,000 yards last year, and he had 29 touchdowns and all the. But here's the thing: there's a lot more than just passing yards that has to go into this, because otherwise we'd be sitting here talking about how, the number one quarterback coming back in the country this year is Garrett Nussmeier. Number 2 is Josh Hoover. Number 3 is Chandler Morris. Number 4 is Baron Morton from Texas Tech. It's not about yards to me. It's about, you've got to also, production is key, is important, but it's also, there's a level of consistency that goes into it, and there's also a level of clutch play. And one of my let's talk about what I like about Garrett Nussmeier real quick. He's a gunslinger. I mean, he'll make throws where you're just like, he's going to throw more picks than most quarterbacks just because the way he plays, and I can live with that to a degree. He's got to avoid the, oh crap, I'm panicking picks. That's what hurts Garrett Nussmeier. And he's got to avoid just the highs and lows that we saw last season. There were times last year, guys, where Garrett Nussmeier looked like one of the best quarterbacks in college football. And then there were other times he looked like you might want to think about benching him. And at times, like the Ole Miss game, we saw both of that in the same game. And just that level of inconsistency we saw from him is really something that's got to get corrected. Now, he did finish the year really well. Last 3 games, he threw for 332 against Vandy. He threw for 277 against Oklahoma, 313 against Baylor. He was at least 8.9 yards per attempt in every game, and he had 7 touchdowns and 1 pick. He only had 1 pick in the last 4 games. So if he can continue that trend, then I think he's going to go higher on this list. But it's just the week-to-week consistency. But there's talent there. I also ding him a little bit because when you look at the yards, he threw for 4,000 yards, but he was minus on the season in rushing yards. He's minus 38. And so, he had 4,000 yards, but I can look at some other quarterbacks who had over 4,000 total yards because they weren't just passers. But he's still on my list at number 9. That's going to be lower than most have him, but I just watched too many big games where Garrett Nussmeier just was a part of the problem for LSU to put him anywhere higher. But the tools there, guys, are really good, and I could see Garrett Nussmeier jumping into the top 5 this season. He's just got to be more consistent. That's the thing.
Well, and he's going to have his opportunity right off the bat when is it at Clemson or is it a neutral site?
At Clemson.
Okay.
Yeah.
So he's going to have his opportunity right off the bat.
Not everyone's like Lincoln Riley. Some programs are willing to actually play tough teams and even go on the road and play tough teams. So.
Well, I will say, though, Garrett Nussmeier does benefit from the fact that I think the rest of their big games outside of Alabama are at home, right? Well, Ole Miss is on the road, but they get, they're getting Florida at home, they get A&M at home, they get Arkansas at home, they get, it's going to be interesting to see what they do. I'll just leave it at that. So
and he had a couple rough games at home last year. Alabama was a rough game. Ole Miss was a weird game because he made some money throws down the stretch. But he was part of the reason that they were also losing for much of that game.
Yeah, right.
And that's something he's going to have to improve upon. Somebody said, well, he threw for 405, he threw for 337 yards against Ole Miss. I'm like, he threw 51 passes. He was 6.6 yards per attempt. If you throw 51 passes, you should at least get to 400 yards.
That's stat stuff.
300 yards. Yeah, exactly. So there were a lot of games like that. He threw for 405 yards against Texas A&M on 50 attempts. He also had 3 terrible interceptions in that game. In a blowout loss. So yards aren't the only story. He could go higher. He's like Blake Horvath, to me, is going to be in the bottom 3 or 4 the whole year. Garrett Nussmeier could, in my opinion, could potentially jump in the top 3 if he can be more consistent. And that's going to be the key. Yep. Haynes King is my next guy, fellas. For him, the thing with Haynes King is just going to be about staying healthy. But when he was on the field last year, he was a difference maker. And then we saw that it wasn't just the Georgia game either. We saw that at times last year. He's the reason that the Louisville game was even close with some of the throws he made in that game. He's the only reason the Syracuse game was even close. Games that they lost. He missed 2 whole games. And against Miami and NC State, he only combined for 9 pass attempts as he just kind of came off and threw a couple balls and couldn't really play a lot. But so if you really think about it, his production, he threw for a little under 2,100 yards. And he only played, I think, 9 games last season. 14 touchdowns, 2 picks. The 2 picks was the big thing for me, guys, because the one knock that we had on him last year, the thing was he was borderline on our list last year because he made a ton of plays. But what we said was he's got to limit the turnovers. He turned the ball over way too much in 2023, threw 16 interceptions. Last year only threw 2. He threw one against Georgia State in game 2 and threw one against Vanderbilt in a bowl game. But he's just a warrior. The kid he plays hard. He can make plays with his legs. He had 587 rushing yards and 11 rushing touchdowns last season. So he had 25 touchdowns, basically playing, I think, 9 games is what he played. So it'd be 1, 2, let's see here. He played like full games. He played 7, 8, 9 full games last year and rushed for over 500 yards, threw for over 2,000 yards, had 25 touchdowns. So if he's healthy, I think he's going to be good. And the other thing that's going to help him too is he had small receivers last year. Malik Rutherford comes back in a small, but I have a feeling that Haynes King and Isaiah Canyon are going to become very good friends this year. And having that 6'3" vertical type of weapon is going to be a huge benefit to Haynes King as Isaiah Canyon goes into his second year. So I'm a big Haynes King fan. He won me over last year because he was better protecting the football without becoming afraid to throw it. Like, and that was the big thing. So I'm a big Haynes King fan, but Trevor's got to stay healthy. I know you're going to talk about that. I know you may not have to talk about it, but like that was the reason Trev told me he didn't have Haynes King in the top 10, which is very fair. He's got to show that he's healthy. Number 7 on my list, guys, is John Mateer from Washington State. He's a guy that I had a hard time placing because if you look at the production, he's a top 5 quarterback, and there's a lot of people hyping him up as a top 5 quarterback. 3,139 passing yards last year, averaged 9 yards per pass attempt, 29 touchdowns, 7 picks, 164.09 passer rating. Those are all excellent numbers in only 12 games. Then he also rushed for 826 yards and 15 more touchdowns. So you're talking about a guy that was right under 4,000 yards, had 44 touchdowns last season, only threw 7 interceptions. My concern, however, is he did that against mostly a group of 5 schedule. They played Portland State, San Jose State, Boise, Fresno, Hawaii, San Diego State, Utah State, New Mexico, Oregon State, who basically looked like a G5 team last year, and then Wyoming. He didn't play in the bowl game against Syracuse. I really wish he would have, but I understood why he didn't. But the production was there, and you look at some of the better teams he played. He threw for a lot of yards against Boise State in a game they got blown out. And he didn't throw for a lot of yards against Texas Tech. He went 9 of 19 for 115 yards, 1 touchdown and 1 pick. And you're like, well, that's not real good. Allow me to finish, please. He ran for 197 yards and a touchdown. Like, that's what makes him impactful. Is there are games he's not throwing the ball great, but he can still really hurt you because of his ability to be a dynamic runner. And I do think his running ability translates well to playing in the SEC. I think he's athletic enough to make some plays. He also rushed for 62 yards against Washington in the game. He also passed for 245 yards. So he did have some, P4 experience last year, and he had solid moments in those games. I don't know that he lit any of those teams up, but he had some good moments, and he was good against Boise, but he didn't really impact the game, Trevor, in a way where they could then go toe to toe. A lot of those yards were kind of, you're getting whooped, you're behind, and some of that production. But he's a good football player. In that Oklahoma offense, you're going to get Deion Burks back. You're going to get some guys back from injury. Get Jay Knott coming in at running back. Here's the big thing for me too, guys. I get real nervous about guys going from basically the G5 level, which essentially is what Washington State was, who they played, and he was certainly that before, and then they make the jump to the Power 4 level. But what's going to help John Mateer is his OC is going with him. So the guy that, his OC knows him. He knows the OC. He knows the offense, which is going to help those other guys kind of – I think having that will help him get everybody else up to speed in a way that was different for, let's say, like a Riley Leonard going from a Duke to a Notre Dame, where he's the only guy that really went.
Sure.
So I think that'll help him. That'll help him as well. So I have him number 7. And then number 6 for me is Josh Hoover. And Josh Hoover, more than any quarterback on this list, is an example of why, for me, this is not a NFL draft list. This is a college football list. I really like Josh Hoover as a college quarterback. He doesn't have a monster arm. He doesn't have this guy's a first-round top 10 NFL draft pick. But what he does is he produces and he plays a fun style of play. He's not a guy that is necessarily a runner. It was minus 19 yards last year. But he can move around in the pocket and buy time and climb and escape and all that, guys. But he threw for 3,949 yards last year, completed over 66% of his passes with 8.4 yards per attempt, 27 touchdowns, 11 picks. He had over a 151, passer rating last season. Had some games where he's going to have to play better than he did against certain games. But, he was a big reason why TCU improved last season. He had some starts in 2000 as a redshirt freshman in 2023 in a year where TCU struggled. Came on late in the year, had some monster games down the stretch and games where, again, they lost. But his last 4 games of 2023, when he was thrust into the starting lineup, last 6 games, he threw for 439 against BYU, 353 against Texas Tech. He had 302 against Texas in a game they almost knocked off Texas. He threw for 412 against Baylor, and then he threw for 344 in a game where they lost to Oklahoma by 25, but they scored 45 points. It wasn't exactly the offense's fault. And then he comes out last year and he continues the same thing. 353 against Stanford, 396 at SMU in a game they lost by 24, but they scored 42. They gave up 66. He threw for 356 against Kansas, 344 against Texas Tech, 333 against Baylor, and ended the season in a bowl game against Lafayette with 252 yards, but 4 touchdowns. So highly productive. I think he's an elevator. He makes the guys around him better because he's smart. He throws with good timing. He knows where to go with the football. Not a big-time NFL draft prospect, but a really good player in college football that produces. And when you take over a team that's 5-7 and you lead them to a 9-4 season, you've told me that you're able to make that football team better. And that's what Josh Hoover showed me last year, and that's why he's number 6 on my list.
So the fun part about these lists, by the way, and if I have the correct list written down in front of me, we're going to see Trevor's list 10 through 6 next, and you're going to see one name that is the same 6 through 10.
In the same spot.
In the same spot. That's correct. In the exact same spot, which I find very fascinating. And just as a teaser, as a carrot moving forward, they have one other guy in the exact same spot in their 1 through 5 list. And that's it. There's only 2 guys that are in the exact same spot. So, or actually 3, excuse me. But anyway, let's head over to Trevor's list here. Trevor, I'm going to give you the floor to start talking about your list. I may interject here and there, maybe to ask you a clarifying question or two. But let's move over to your list, starting at number 10, moving all the way up to number 6.
Yeah, you got it. In the same light, and we were talking about this before the show, in the same light that Bryan's not a triple option guy and he has Blake Horvath at number 10, you guys know what my feelings are about Nebraska, and they are very much in show me mode, which I'm sure brings a lot of questions as to why my number 10 quarterback is Dylan Raiola at Nebraska, which is fair. That is a fair question, and I understand that completely. Now, look, here's the thing with him. I do think if Nebraska, and this is going to be a common theme for some of the quarterbacks that I have on this list, if Nebraska is going to play to their potential, I think Dylan Raiola has to be at the center of that conversation. I like the pieces that they added in the transfer portal. Matt Rule's going into his 3rd year. Dylan Raiola is going into his 2nd full year as a starter. Now, he has started 13 games at the college level. He did it last year as a true freshman, went 7-6. He had 2,819 passing yards, 13 touchdowns, 11 interceptions, 67.1 completion percentage as a true freshman. Now, that is a number that stuck out to me. Turnovers have to get corrected, but 67% completion percentage as a true freshman in the Big Ten, that's impressive. And that's you remove the name from it, the school from it. That is an impressive statistic. A lot of Dylan Raiola for me is projection. I love the tools. I love the size. I really like his arm talent. He made some true freshman mistakes last season, and that was evident when you watched him play. Now, on top of being a starting true freshman at Nebraska, he was also kind of brought into – it wasn't like a situation where like when Everett Golson was a redshirt freshman starter at Notre Dame, he had a lot of really good pieces around him. Dylan Raiola came in as an 18-year-old, and they were like, hey, turn this program around, and went 7-6 as a starter and won their bowl game against Boston College. That's impressive to me. Now, he has a long way to go in showing me what that truly means. I mean, Nebraska as a team, they dropped 5 of their last 6 regular season games, and their only win was against Nebraska, but they did bounce back and beat Boston College in a bowl game. Now, where his numbers need to improve, obviously interceptions need to go down, but he also averaged 6.8 yards per attempt over the course of the season. That is partially why his completion percentage was at 67% as a true freshman. A lot of dump-off passes, a lot of checkdowns. But with that being said, there are some other quarterbacks throughout college football that as sophomores, juniors, seniors aren't willing to take checkdowns. And that's something that Dylan Raiola, I guess, has mastered. I guess who said it on the show? Somebody called somebody checkdown Charlie. You know, so maybe that's
yeah. That wasn't me. I called the Ian Book Captain Checkdown.
Yeah,
okay, Captain
Checkdown.
Checkdown.
I think that was a Bill Bender quote, wasn't it?
Was it? Okay,
I think so.
Okay.
I think so.
But that is something that he's going to have to get more comfortable with, and something that I'm confident projecting in somebody going into their 2nd full year as a starter. Then you add in the transfer portal additions. Then you add in Matt Rule going into his 3rd year. So Dylan Raiola is on my list. I had trouble between him, Haynes King, and Blake Horvath at this spot. That was a really tough, like legitimately, if we were doing votes out of say 100, I mean, Raiola probably had 34, another player had 33, the next guy had 32, how that math works out. Point being, it was very, very close. But Dylan Raiola for me is in my 10th spot. The 9th guy is the spot that Bryan and I have the same, and that's Garrett Nussmeier at LSU. Now, I do also believe we're in the same boat, Bryan. I think he has the opportunity to rise up on this list, but he needs to clean up his performance specifically in big games. He had 5 interceptions between the Alabama and Texas A&M losses. He did put up a lot of yards, finished number 5 in college football, but in bigger moments, he performed poorly. And that's not just going back and looking at the box score and seeing, okay, what all did he do? You know, you go back and you look at where he is. He has 14 career starts. He's 10-4 as a starter, going into his second year as the full-time starter. But he is very much a gunslinger. With quarterbacks with his play style, I don't pay too much attention into total number of interceptions, as long as what Bryan said, they're not the bad interceptions or too many of them where it's just the, what is that?
You got to live with a couple of them.
100%. That's what,
because that's what makes him good too, is that gunslinger mentality, right?
Absolutely.
So, let me ask both of you guys, since you both had him at number 9, right? So he was throwing the ball all over the place. You said it 51 times, you know, all these different things. LSU's got to have a better run game, right? If Garrett Nussmeier if Garrett's going to jump up the list here, he's going to have a complimentary run game, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, to a degree. I mean, that's not really who LSU is, but I think they will. I really like Caden Durham.
Yeah.
And now the biggest question for me though, Vince, is not the run game. I think Caden Durham showed some things last year. Didn't play the first game of the year. Only had 5 carries for 4 yards in Nicholls State in game 2. Only had 6 carries for 14 yards in game 4. But he still finished with 753 yards and 5.4 per carry and 6 touchdowns. LSU's going to throw the ball a lot. I think they do need to complement the pass game better. But I think the bigger question for me, Vince, when it comes to and Trevor, I wonder if this is part of what factored in for you as well, why Nussmeier's lower for me than he is for others, is I don't think Garrett Nussmeier is like a great scrambler. And he doesn't handle pressure like, and I don't mean like game pressure, like he punks in big situations, because like just the ending of the Ole Miss game alone should show you that that's not what I mean. I mean like actual pass rushing pressure, he doesn't handle real well. Saw that against especially against Texas A&M. I have major questions about their offensive line.
Yeah,
that's a bigger question for me, and I don't know that he can handle that. That could limit him a little bit. Plus, he's got a bunch of new receivers.
Yep.
But if those things handle themselves, then I think he could, and he can do what Trevor said, limit some of the bad turnovers, just be a little bit more consistent. Then I think he's got every opportunity in the world to rise up this list.
Well, and when it's a part of your play style, sometimes you just live with it. Dabo Swinney learned to live with some of the horrible turnovers Deshaun Watson had the year they won a national championship. He had 16 picks that year. And so really just kind of depends on the nature of them, what all it looks like, because there is a world where they could sit down Garrett Nussmeier. It's like, hey, you got to stop turning the ball over more. But he won't be the same type of player. Just wouldn't be. And that's what Dabo Swinney said about Deshaun Watson. He was asked leading up to the national championship, hey, like, do you have to kind of have conversations with Deshaun about taking care of the ball? And it's like, look, then he wouldn't be able to do the things that make him so great. And I think Garrett Nussmeier is looked at in a similar light, not in the same view as Deshaun Watson, but play style wise, it's more the same. And I'm staying consistent with, you know what, man, sometimes Brian Kelly just randomly catches fire and they have a good season. And Garrett Nussmeier would be at the center of that if that were to happen, putting together some transfer portal receiving cores and having a good season. So he's my number 9 quarterback. My number 8 quarterback on this list is DJ Lagway, the quarterback at Florida. Now, he is somebody where the kind of the weight of the season, the success of Florida this upcoming season falls heavily on the shoulders of DJ Lagway. I like some of the supporting cast that they have, but you go and you look at what he's done. DJ Lagway has started 7 games in his career. He's actually 6-1 as a starter. He was one of the big reasons why Florida helped turn around, or why Florida's season kind of turned around at the end there after a really rough-looking start. Now, some of the questions with him. He had 9 interceptions last season. However, 4 of his 9 interceptions came when he wasn't the starter, but came in off the bench in more of a relief role. I'm not saying that makes the interceptions better or worse, but as we've all talked about before, being the backup and coming in, you prepare a little bit differently than what you would as when you know that you're going in as a starter. You prepare differently in the week of practice. You prepare differently the day of. So that was a factor for me in some of his turnovers. Now, health is a question for me. Now, he is one of the higher ceiling quarterbacks on my list. He kept them in the game. I mean, the Georgia-Florida game was looking like it was going to turn into an interesting one until he got knocked out of the game. Then you start hearing about some of the shoulder soreness that he's having so far this offseason. That was also a question mark for me. But when I go and I look overall, I like what he brings to the table. A lot of people are going to assume that he's a dual threat guy. He's not. He's a pass-first quarterback. He only had 101 rushing yards last season in 7 starts. I don't think he had any rushing touchdowns either. So he had 1,915 passing yards, 12 passing touchdowns. Interceptions need to get cut back a little bit, but I think some of that will happen organically as he is allowed to prepare more as the full-time starter. But I have him at 8, mostly for what he means to Florida's team. A lot of their success is going to ride off of the performance of DJ Lagway, so that's where I have him in this one. At number 7, I have a guy that kind of gets forgotten about a little bit, and I think some of that is because of how he ended his season last year, and that's Kevin Jennings. That's the quarterback at SMU. Now, Kevin Jennings was off to a tear. He was the talk of the town. Everybody was talking about him. SMU's going to the ACC Conference Championship game. You know, he comes in, he replaces Stone, I believe. He took over for Stone after the
Preston
BYU
Stone,
game.
yeah.
Yep. Now, he has 13 career starts. He's 10-3 as a starter. Last season, not even starting the full slate of games, he had 3,245 passing yards, 23 touchdowns, 11 interceptions, 354 rushing yards, 5 rushing touchdowns. He was a very electric playmaker for that offense last season. And if SMU wants to kind of prove some of the doubters wrong, doubters in terms of they didn't deserve to make the playoffs, that crowd, he's going to kind of be the focal point of this offense again, saying, hey, look, last season wasn't fluky. We are a good football team. Unfortunately for him, how he ended his season is just recency bias. It's how people remember Kevin Jennings. 3 interceptions against Penn State, 2 of them returned for touchdowns. But people are very quick to forget the comeback that he helped lead SMU in the ACC championship game. They're very quick to forget how he performed against UNLV, other teams in the regular season, where SMU was a good football team. And so that for me was kind of the separating factor with him. Now, I have to do more research on my end around what he has coming back, because I know SMU coming back
a decent amount. They lost some guys, got some guys back,
Okay.
got some guys new, and that shouldn't be too much of an issue skill-wise. Okay. O-line is a little bit more of a question mark for me.
Okay. But for Kevin Jennings, he's somebody that is going to look to build off of his season last year. Like I said, 10-3 as a starter, stepping in and leading SMU to their first college football playoff and a bid, their first season in the ACC, into the ACC Conference Championship. That carries a little bit of weight for me, and I think he's going to use some of that momentum moving forward. Then to round out my 10 through 6, I have Lenora Sellers at South Carolina. Now, he is one of the more polarizing quarterbacks. There are some people that I've seen some lists that have him as the number 1 overall quarterback coming back in college football this season. I have some people that I've seen some lists where they don't even have him ranked in the top 10 of returning quarterbacks. I fall, as you guys see, somewhere a little bit in the middle. I have no pushback if anybody wants to rank him higher. I totally get it, because it's about upside and projection. But when you look at him, he has 12 career starts. He's 8-4 as a starter. He started, I believe, did he start every game last season for South Carolina?
No, he got hurt against LSU and then missed the next week against Akron.
Okay.
Because that was the game, remember, I've said, if he doesn't get hurt, South Carolina beats LSU last year.
Yeah, that's right.
Because then they put in Robbie Ashford, and he had some really bad turnovers and plays. And yeah.
But Lenora Sellers, I mean, he is an electric playmaker, man. I mean, he is a dual threat quarterback. He passed for 2,534 yards last year, 18 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. He rushed for 674 yards and added 7 rushing touchdowns on the ground in 12 games. Now, he had breakout games last season against Texas A&M, Clemson, put up video game numbers against Missouri. So he is a dual threat aspect to that offense. Now, for him, it's can you take that next step into year 2 as a starter? Can you become not just the flashy playmaker, make crazy plays with your arm, but can you truly manage a game? I think sometimes game managers can get too bad of a rep, but there are times when we saw it in 2012 with Everett Golson, electric playmaker. Sometimes you need to settle down a little bit, be the playmaker you are, but also do what you can to live within the offense. I don't view that, depending on how it's brought up, as negatively, but sometimes Sellers, when you go back and pop in the film, sometimes he just needs to learn to take what the defense gives him and not try to make a Heisman moment.
Right.
You know what I mean? Sometimes hey, it's okay to take the 5-yard check down. You don't have to scramble around in the backfield because you're so athletic and take that 11-yard sack, and so that's where he lives for me. He has room to move up because he's a very exciting playmaker, but I have him at 6 for now. It'll be fun to reevaluate him as the season ends and goes on.
Yeah. He is the player, I'll say this, Trev, that grew the most in my rose in my rankings the most as I started studying more film. And breaking these kids down, watching film, looking beyond the numbers and just watching film. He would have been at the bottom of my top 10 when we would have done this list earlier in the year.
Sure.
And he's now much higher on my list. So people are like, I don't think there's some people in the chat like, I don't think he's as good. Like, if you guys think that, then you're going to hate my list when you get to my top 5. If you're busting Trevor's chops for having Lenore Sellers 6, you guys are going to hate me in a minute. So, yeah.
Well, yeah. Well, guess what? Guess what it's time for, Bryan? It's time to see the top 5 of your list, 5 through 1, starting at 5, working our way up. Again, now is the time where we're going to see some similar names on both lists, but they're going to be in a bit of a different order. And so that's what makes this is intriguing, to say the least. So I will say, and I don't want to, that there's the number 5 spot is actually the same for both of you guys.
Yes.
So let's see it, Bryan.
And what I was thinking too, Trev, is if you want to just also comment on this next guy, Sam Levitt, we can kind of just knock that one out. And then when it's your turn, you can just kind of cruise past that one. But I have Sam Levitt number 5 on my list, and he's a guy that I've had a tough time with this offseason as far as the push, because I watched him several times last year, and I want to push back on some of the hype he's getting. And I've seen somebody say he might be the best quarterback in the country and he's a top 2-3 guy. And I'm like, hold on a second, let's pump the brakes on that. And the production was good last year, but it wasn't like elite. It wasn't special, but and I kind of had some pushback against, Lenore Sellers for the same reason. But then you got to remember, this kid was a redshirt freshman last year, and he threw 23 passes the year before. He went 15 of 23 at Michigan State, comes to Arizona State, wins the starting quarterback job, is okay the first couple games. I don't really care about what he did against Wyoming. Had some struggles against Mississippi State. Had some up and down moments against Texas State. Didn't play that great. Had good numbers against Texas Tech, but had some big mistakes that proved costly. The Kansas game, he throws 4 touchdowns, doesn't put up a lot of yards. He gets hurt against Utah. When he came back from that injury, he was a different kid the rest of the year. He went for his first game back. He went for 304 and 3 touchdowns against Oklahoma State. Went for 161 and 3 touchdowns, no picks, and a win over UCF. 275, 3 touchdowns, no picks, and a win over Kansas State on the road, which I believe at the time K-State was ranked in the top 25 when they beat them in that game. Next week, he goes for 247, 1 touchdown and a pick on only 25 attempts, so 9.9 yards per attempt, and also did a nice job of avoiding pressures in that game against BYU, and a win over a ranked BYU team, which vaulted them. Goes against Arizona. They just light up Arizona, 291 yards on 22 pass attempts. And then he throws for 219 yards on only 17 pass attempts against Iowa State, rushes for 33 yards and a touchdown, and then did not play well against Texas. Had some impressive plays against Texas. Like, his highlight reel against Texas is really impressive. But when you watch every play, you're like, kid has a lot to learn. But you know what that late season meant for me, guys? They went into November, I think, Trevor, you've said this, with the 7th best odds of playing in the Big 12 title game.
Yep.
That's the pressure this kid faced coming out of the game he missed with an injury. And he played his best football down the stretch. In the last 6 games of the season, and I'm before the playoffs, so 5 regular season games and then the Big 12 title game, this kid threw 16 touchdowns and had 1 pick. With the season, and if we want to have any chance of winning the Big 12 title, we got to run the table. And during that stretch, this kid threw 16 touchdowns and had 1 pick, and he also rushed for a touchdown. 17 touchdowns and 1 pick in the last 6 games of the regular season, or 5 games of regular season, plus the Big 12 title game. And he battled against Texas. He just was playing a pretty darn good pass defense in that game. And he played a role in helping them bring back. So the more I study Sam Leavitt and get over my desire to push back on the national narrative, and just dive into the film and say, that was a redshirt freshman in year 1 at a college because he had transferred from Michigan State. That's a pretty darn good season for a team that went 3-9 the year before. And then
they started off horribly. Like their season started off very bad.
Well, yeah, because the loss to Texas Tech, right? And so, but when I look at Arizona State too, guys, is the thing you got to think about. And I'm pretty sure that Jordan Travis did not play in the Big 12 title game either.
He didn't. I looked it up.
He was a 1,000-yard receiver, and he was coming off of the last 6 games that Jordan Travis played in before he got hurt. 108 catches, or 108 yards, 81 yards, 99 yards, 176 yards, 125 yards, 143 yards. Then they go in the Big 12 title game without him, and Sam Leavitt does the exact same thing he'd been doing with him. That said a lot to me. And so that's why I got Sam Leavitt number 5 on my list, Trev. I would not have had him number 5 if we would have just done this off a kind of gut feel and just watching some games and the hype. I don't know that I would have had him in my top 10. But the more I dove into the film, you think about him being a redshirt freshman, you look at some of the circumstances, what was on the line in some of those games, he vaulted way up my list for me.
I couldn't agree more. I echo everything that you just said. Look, when we start talking about quarterbacks being good at the college level, Bryan, you mentioned that this isn't an NFL draft projection list. Some of the best quarterbacks in college are just gamers, man. When they can just kind of look at what's ahead of them on the schedule, just be like, all right, giddy up. It's time to go. And that's Sam Leavitt to me. I mean, he's the starting quarterback of a team that was projected by his own conference to finish last in the Big 12 before the start of the 2024 season. And his performance helped spark essentially their run to all the numbers that you pointed out. I think he gets overshadowed a little bit because of the success and what the story of Cam Skattebo last year was, and Skattebo's performance to help kind of bring Arizona State back in that game against Texas. But what would have Sam Leavitt's numbers would have looked like if they had Jordan Tyson in that game? Without Jordan Tyson, they absolutely handled Iowa State in the conference championship game, a game that their own conference said that they had no business being in. I echo a lot of the same things that you say about Sam Leavitt. He was number 5 on my list as well.
They also won the only game he didn't play in that Cam Skattebo didn't play in last year. They beat UCF in a game where Cam Skattebo didn't play. And then Cam Skattebo didn't play. They shut Cam Skattebo down. Kansas State shut him down because their whole game plan was, we're going to make your quarterback beat us. And Cam Skattebo had, I think it was like 73 yards on 22 carries. They're like, if you're going to beat us, you're going to have to beat us with Sam Leavitt. Sam Leavitt was like, word.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. I will.
Mm-hmm.
And they went out and won that game on the road. So that's why he's on my list. Number 4 on my list, guys, is Drew Aller. A very polarizing player. There's people in this chat, I promise you, wouldn't have him in the top 10. There's other people that have him number 1. I think Drew Aller's number 4. And in my view, this is his ceiling. This is his ceiling. And when I look at Drew Aller, I see a guy that is a flawed quarterback. There's no question about it. And the thing that I don't know that Drew Aller's ever going to be that guy that can kind of necessarily put a team on his shoulders against the best teams they play. But he's a guy that's been a consistent player for most of his career. And he's been a 2-year starter. The last 2 seasons, this is a kid that's thrown 49 touchdowns and has only thrown 10 interceptions. That can't be ignored. He's a kid that at times last year was willing to say, hey, look, things aren't going great. We're down against USC. I got to step up. I got to put the team on my shoulders for a little bit. And he did that. And he played very poorly in the first half and then came out in the second half with them down 20-6 and lit USC on fire with the way that he played. And I also thought he battled his butt off against Oregon and made some big-time throws. The thing for him is he's just going to have to be consistent. And a lot of people bang on him for how he played against Notre Dame. And I want to remind people that there has not been a better pass defense in college football the last 2 years. And there's been a lot of quarterbacks like C.J. Stroud, like Caleb Williams. Drew Aller played a whole lot better against Notre Dame last year than Caleb Williams played against Notre Dame the year before. So I just think people kind of bang on him a little bit too much and are too critical of him. This is a kid that had a 153.47 quarterback rating last year and whose team went to the national semifinals and who was throwing Tyler Warren all those passes. So I just think he gets a bad rap, but I also think this is as high as I could go with him. And my prediction would be is if I'm wrong on him being 4, I'm going to be wrong in that he should be lower, then he'll be higher. Because I just think there's some limitations to him from a processing reads standpoint. And the fact that he has a very long throwing motion, he's never, in my opinion, going to be a guy that's completing like 70% of his passes while throwing downfield against a Notre Dame, against a Texas, against Ohio State. He may do that on the season, but it's because he'll kind of tear up the teams that are a little bit less. So I just think that there's I'm in the middle ground on Drew Aller. I'm not potential number 1 overall pick hype like we were hearing last year, which I think is freaking nuts. And I'm also not one of those he sucks people. I think he's a good college quarterback. That is a top 10 college quarterback. If I'm wrong on him, though, I'll bet you that I'm wrong because he'll drop down to like 6 or 7. But he is without a doubt, in my opinion, a top 10 quarterback in my view. So I have him number 4. I also think he's going to have a better overall supporting cast this year. No, there's no Ty Warren, but if you guys know anything about the tight end depth chart at Penn State, they're going to be fine at tight end. They won't be Tyler Warren good, but they're going to be just fine. The receiving core is much improved. He's in year 2 of Andy Kotelnicki's offense, which also matters. This is the first time as a starter he gets to go into a season running the same offense. And anyone that knows what Mike Yurcich was doing compared to what Andy Kotelnicki was doing, that kid learned a dramatically different offense last year. Now he gets to repeat that in year 3. I think he's a good football player. So we'll see how that goes. And then he also has a really good supporting cast, good defense, good running game. I think Drew Aller's a good football player. Number 3 on my list is Arch Manning. Again, this is a projection list. Arch is another kind of an interesting player because I've said before that I think Arch gets a little bit too much hype and people act like he's like the greatest quarterback in the world, but I do think he's a very talented player. He's in a system that is going to be great for him. Look, I don't know, like Lincoln Riley has kind of taken a step back to me, and I'm kind of elevating Steve Sarkisian more into that number 1 quarterback developer role right now because of what he's done in recent seasons, going back to Mac Jones in 2020, and then obviously, I think he got a lot more out of Quinn Ewers than I think he should have got out of Quinn Ewers. I'm not a big Quinn Ewers fan, as you guys know. I think the thing that separates Arch is he's a smart kid, he's got a good arm, but he's going to add a running element to this offense that they lacked last year. I have some concerns about the offensive line, but he's going to have very good weapons. There's a lot of returning weapons. The run game will help protect him a little bit. His own running ability will protect him a little bit. I have Arch number 3. I think he's there on my list. I just think his combination of talent, the talent around him, the system he plays in, I think he's going to have a big year. And he just seems to be a kid that just kind of is able to drown out the noise. I worry a lot about the pressure getting to him, of all the hype getting to him. But he just seems to be the kind of kid that just doesn't seem to pay a lot of attention to that.
Sure.
And helps drown it out. And I think that's why he's going to be able to overcome some of the – I mean, guys, if to some people, if Arch Manning finishes the year as the 3rd best quarterback in the country, there will be some people that will be like, well, maybe he's not as good as I thought he was. Like, that's the crazy hype that's on Arch Manning. And I think it's unfair to the kid, but I still think he's a really good quarterback. And so I have him number 3 on my list. And they're going to need him to be that good because he's going to have to be more of a playmaker than Ewers was. There's no question about that. Number 2 on my list is Lenore Sellers. And I have kind of done not a 180 on the Lenore because I thought he was a good player, but I thought he was getting way too much hype. And he's especially getting too much hype from an NFL draft standpoint. I think he needs to show a lot more. But guys, when I look at Lenore Sellers the last season and you really start to study his game, I forgot to say something about Arch Manning. The reason I'm willing to project more with Arch than I am some other quarterbacks is because we've seen Arch play. I don't have CJ Carr on my list, although I think CJ Carr could end up in the top 10 because I've never seen CJ Carr throw a pass. Arch Manning threw for 939 yards and 9 touchdowns last year, and also rushed for over 100 yards and 4 more touchdowns. So it's not like this kid's never played. This kid also started 2 games last year. That's not a ton, but it's not like he's never played a meaningful down. And so I think that factors in as well. But to Lenore Sellers, there's a lot of picking his game apart. And a lot of the games where I saw Lenore Sellers play, like where I watched full games, were some of the early in the season games. I watched him play. I watched this film against LSU, and I thought he did some really dynamic things running the football, but he was a work in progress as a passer. I watched him against Ole Miss in a game where he really struggled throwing the football. I watched him against Alabama where he made some plays, but also showed, again, still a bit of a work in progress. And I watched the game against against Texas A&M, where he made some big-time throws down the field, but he completed less than 50% of his passes. This offseason, as I started breaking down some of his performances later in the year, you saw a kid that was starting to get a better feel of reading defenses. He was starting to make better decisions. He was starting to speed up some of his decision-making. He started making more plays out of in the pocket, which certainly impacted things for me. 2,500 yards passing, 8.5 per attempt, 65.6 completion yard rate, 18 touchdowns, 7 picks is not impressive. But when you look at his production, guys, he had 13 touchdown passes in his last 6 games. So much more productive as from a pass game production standpoint. And the last 6 games, he had 5 of his best 6 yards performances down the stretch as well in some crucial moments. And so A&M ends the season. South Carolina ends the season on a 6-0 stretch, and it coincides with Lenore Sellers really getting hot, playing his best football. On top of that, fellas, you add what he does on the ground. 674 yards. He had 2 games over 100 yards last year. Clemson did a pretty good job of really upsetting the South Carolina pass game last year. The South Carolina receivers were not getting open, and the pass rush against them was the O-line did not do a good job of protecting Lenore Sellers last year, and that stalled the offense. Was his least productive passing game of the second half of the year. So what does he do? He starts making plays with his legs. 16 carries, 166 yards, 2 touchdowns, and he had the game winner with about a minute left, Trev. He makes a great play on third. I think it was 3rd and 16. He takes off running and ends up scoring, or that might have been his first touchdown against them, but I think it was his second touchdown, and just has an excellent performance and leads them to a victory at Clemson. So I've come around when you consider redshirt freshman. He's got a lot of weapons coming back. Same system he gets to play in. He's a kid that has shown me a lot of maturity as a quarterback. He can make plays with his legs, and there's just some things he can do physically. You're just like watching him make plays that you're just like, I don't know that there's anybody else in college football. Not many people in college football can do that. Meaning like he's getting yanked down from behind, and it looks like he's going to go down, and he comes out of it, takes off running, and then ends up throwing the ball down the field. Like there's just some things he can do where it's like there's no way he's getting out of the pocket there. Oh, never mind. Oh, there he goes. Okay. He's a playmaker. He's a big-time playmaker. But what he showed second half of the year is that he can also play within structure and rip you apart. And if he can build on that this year, guys, so like this is definitely a projection pick for me. If we're predicting right now who is the top 5 quarterbacks in the country right now, Lenore Sellers is not in my top 5, most likely. But I'm projecting what I think they'll be, then he went way up my list because I see him making that big year 2 starter jump. And that's what I expect we're going to see from Lenore Sellers, especially with what's around him. So my number 1 quarterback is CJ Carr. No, I'm kidding. It's Cade Klubnik from Clemson is my number 1 quarterback. Trev, I know we both have Cade number 1. I'm sorry, I'm giving away a little bit of too much there, but
yeah, but that's okay. You guys can both talk about him just like you did the Sam Levitt. You know what I mean? Because
the more I see Cade Klubnik, the more I liked what he did last year. One thing about Cade that I think gets underrated is I don't think people appreciate how good his arm is. There's throws he's made. He made a touchdown pass last year with a guy in his face where he threw the ball from like his own 47, and his receiver caught it in the end zone. That's a 50-plus yard bomb with the dude in his face. And he made some plays in an offense where he had to he finally had some receivers around him. And once those young receivers started to get comfortable, he played better. Cade is not the kind of guy that's got the talent to take a average team, put them on his shoulders, and lead them to victory like Trevor Lawrence could, and Taj Boyd could do. I shouldn't say average because they had some good players too, but those guys could elevate in a way that I don't know that Cade can. But when you put some players around him and he got more experience last year, he became a far, far more effective player. And I also don't think he gets enough credit for what he does athletically. This is a kid that, like Lenore Sellers, does a great job of avoiding pressure, has really good escapability. He's not quite as dynamic of an athlete as Lenoris, but there's a lot of similarities. We talk about Lenoris's walk-off against Clemson. Well, I think that the first touchdown that Clemson had that game was a Cade run. And also, Cade had that long walk-off 50-plus yard touchdown against Pitt with like a minute left in the game where he took off running, made a guy miss in space, cut inside, and takes it to the house. You talked about how well Kevin Jennings played at the late in that game, but big part of what allowed Clemson to win that game is how well Cade played the whole game. 262 yards, 4 touchdowns. He also threw a lot of passes last year. That's the nature of the Clemson offense. So like you look at some of the numbers he had, 288 yards against Pitt. Yeah, but he threw 41 passes in that game. But he had 2 touchdowns, no picks. That's the nature of that offense. But then he also, rushes for 41 yards and has that long touchdown run at the end of the game to walk it off. So, he had 2 rushing touchdowns against South Carolina. Made some absolutely brilliant. I mean, he diced up a Texas secondary that was one of the best pass defenses in college football last year. I mean, that Texas secondary last season, guys, was outstanding. I mean, you look at the postseason, I don't know that anyone played as well as he did. I mean, you could talk about, Will Howard threw for 289 yards, but he threw a lot of short passes. 70 of those yards and his only touchdown came on a screen pass at the end of the first half that Travion Henderson took 70 yards for a touchdown. I mean, Cade was carving Texas up in that game. And yes, his receivers made great catches, but he was putting the balls in spots where you're just like, dude, that's the Austin Westlake version of Cade Klubnik that we had as a 5-star. So I was really impressed with him. He's going to have talent around him. The run game is a little bit of a concern. The uncertainty of who's going to carry the ball. Everyone comes back in the offensive line. Everyone comes back a receiver. They'll have a new tight end. I think Cade Klubnik is a guy that has the highest floor of any quarterback in the country this season. He may not finish number 1, but he will finish in the top 5. And so I just think that because he looks kind of skinny and gangly, that people don't give enough credit to how well that kid throws the football and how far he can throw the football. And that's why Cade is where I'm at in my number 1 list. So your turn, Trev.
Yeah, look, man, as far as Cade Klubnik is concerned, you and I are on the same page. It's always weird to think that last season he passed for over 3,600 yards, 36 touchdowns, and 6 interceptions. You would think because of the stigma around him, he was somewhere in like the 24 touchdown pass range, somewhere in like the 3,100 passing yard range. He was a good player last year, man. And
come on, Cade?
Yes.
He threw for 3,600 yards. Let's see here.
Yeah, 3,639.
3,639 yards, 36 touchdowns, 6 picks.
And he's going to be playing behind a really, really good offensive line this upcoming season as well. All of his main receivers come back. He's going to be playing behind an offensive line that had 3,889 snaps just in 2024. They have a combined 128 career starts. So the ingredients are there for him to have, repeat another type of season like this. I echo a lot of the same things that you do about Cade. He's my number 1 as well. Now,
all right, let's get to your.
We already talked about Sam Leavitt being my 5th. Okay. My number 4 quarterback is the Texas kid, Arch Manning. For a lot of the same reasons that Bryan talked about. Yes, he is relatively inexperienced when you start talking and comparing to him, the Cade Klubniks of the world, the Drew Allers of the world. But look, started 2 games last season, went 2-0 as a starter, played against Mississippi State and Louisiana Monroe, Bryan mentioned his stats earlier. 939 passing yards, 108 rushing yards, 13 total touchdowns, 2 interceptions last season. But he did also play in meaningful games. I mean, he was kind of their change of pace quarterback that they would bring in, have him, use his legs, pick up a third down. I mean, he played in big moments last year. Now, again, in the same light, like I was talking about some quarterbacks earlier on my list, it is different when you're preparing as somebody that just kind of has a niche role in an offense and then preparing as a starter. But the kid grew up his entire life with his last name being Manning. I don't think that he really shies away from attention. I think that's just kind of something that comes with that territory.
And he went to Texas.
Yeah.
There's a lot of other schools he could have picked where the pressure would have been as great. So he picked one of the most pressure-packed quarterback positions on top of having the name. No
100%.
doubt about it.
100%. This is a kid that doesn't shy away from pressure, but it is a projection. And unfortunately, like we've talked about so many times on the show, if he is the 4th best quarterback in the country, there's going to be a lot of people that write him off after the season, which is not fair to a kid entering his first season as a full-time starter. But as of now, Arch Manning is still in my top 5 heading into this season. Offensive line is going to play a big role in some of his success this year because it is a completely different looking offensive line than what they had last year. I have something up on the message boards about that, just a championship contender overview with them. But if they are going to make another run, Arch Manning's going to be at the center of it, man. Now, my 3rd quarterback I know is going to just, for lack of better words, it's just going to piss some people off. It's Carson Beck at Miami. And yes, I understand, and you guys know me, I'm not high on Miami this year, and I'm still sticking true to that. I am. But I look at who Carson Beck is as a player, and I look at what he brings to the table for this Miami team. We're talking about a quarterback that has only ever lost 2 schools. He lost to Ole Miss and Alabama twice. And it's weird to think about that. He has 27 career starts. He's 24-3 as a starter. 2 of his losses came to Alabama. 1 of them came to Ole Miss. Now, he's going into his 3rd year as a starter. He transferred to Miami in the offseason. If Miami is going to have the season that some people think that they are going to, it will be on the shoulders of Carson Beck. Yes, I like the offensive line that they bring back. Mark Fletcher and Jordan Lyle, quality running backs, but they lost a lot of production from last season on offense. They lost their top 5 pass catchers. They are going to need an experienced quarterback like Carson Beck to help bring that group together. Now, we're talking about a guy who was throwing to receivers last year who led the nation in drops. Georgia's wide receivers had 31 drops last season, which led the nation kind of by a lot.
His opponents didn't drop a lot of his throws, though.
Didn't. But it comes into what confidence level do you have with throwing to the receivers when you are not 100% confident that they're going to catch it.
Screw it. I know this defender's going to catch it. I'm throwing it to him.
I guess, man. I need to switch up my list and have Lenore Sellers.
I'm just kidding, dude.
But
I'm totally kidding.
I know. I'm messing with you. But I look at what he brings to the table for Miami. And yes, Cam Ward, he was the number 1 overall draft pick. He did not have the game experience that Carson Beck has coming into Miami this season. I think Cam Ward is a better talent, but
he didn't have the Power 5 game experience.
Or just the big game experience in
big
general.
Game experience. Okay.
Yeah.
You said experience. I just thought you meant like overall. But yeah, big game experience, absolutely correct. Yes.
Yeah. And look, at the end of the day, Carson Beck, they lost to Alabama. He was a big reason why they came back in that game. Also part of the reason why they were down in that game. And so he needs to find somewhere and live in the middle because he can't be he digressed as a passer in terms of turnover margin from 2023 to 2024. I don't know if that has to do with confidence in the receiving core. I don't know if that had to do with some sort of schematic change by Mike Bobo, but that's something that will have to get shored up. But like I said at the start of this, when I put a lot of weight into what these quarterbacks mean to their specific team's success. And I'm projecting a little bit here with Carson Beck. And it's weird to say that I'm projecting with somebody going into their 3rd season as a starting quarterback at the FBS level. But if he's somebody that, if Miami is the team that people think that they are, Carson Beck has the opportunity to prove me wrong / right because of where I have him on this list, because he will be a focal point of that. So I have him 3rd. My number 2 quarterback is Drew Aller Again, like what Bryan said, I know people are just going to not like it. But when you look at the fact of the matter, he is a quarterback going into his third year as a starter. He is 23-6 as a starting quarterback. Last season, he had 3,300 passing yards, 24 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. As much as people don't want to acknowledge it, that kid made some money throws in the postseason, not against Notre Dame to their wide receivers, but some of the throws he had against Boise State were money throws that I hope to see in South Bend this upcoming fall. But to me, I'm projecting a little bit more to like, this is like the top of his ceiling. I think where Drew Aller leaves a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths is that he was this highly touted guy that was supposed to come in and completely take over college football and lead Penn State to the promised land. All things considered, he almost did last season. And we can talk about all the different reasons why, you know, they ran into Notre Dame. That is a big reason. Their path in the playoff wasn't as easy. Look, he lost one game in the regular season last year, took Penn State to their first Big Ten championship since 2016, won their first 2 postseason games. That holds weight to me, truly. And do I think he's going to go out this upcoming season and put up Joe Burrow numbers? No, but I think he's poised to have a better season than what he had last year because of the returning production coming back. A lot of people get hung up on the fact that Tyler Warren is no longer there. I understand. He was a very big part of their passing offense last season. It's warranted. But what they bring back this season, I like their additions in the transfer portal. I like Kyron Hudson coming in. I like Devontae Ross coming in. He was the more productive of the two from what he did at Troy. But I like their receiving core. He's going to be throwing behind an offensive line that is one of the best in the country. I mean, they had over 3,500 snaps in 2024. They have 65 career starts amongst all 5 of them. The signs are pointing in the right direction. And I'm kind of playing into what people perceive his potential to be here with Drew Aller at number 1 or at number 2. And then you guys know my number 1 is the same as Bryan's with Cade Klubnik.
I want to say one thing about Drew Aller also is you know, everybody talks, well, the only team that Carson Beck's lost to is Notre Dame and Alabama. Well, I would argue that he played on a better team than Drew Aller played on, but Drew Aller's only losses are to Ohio State twice, Oregon, Notre Dame, Michigan when the year they won the title, and Ole Miss in a bowl game. Like, he hasn't exactly they haven't been upset either with him. They've won a lot of games. Also want to point out the reason Carson Beck is not on my list, there's 2 big reasons. One, brand new receiving core, but the biggest reason is I have major questions about his health.
Fair.
Which is also, talk about DJ Lagway, but I just think the fact that he's going to have a brand new team, brand new offense, brand new group of receivers that are just kind of solid, combined with the elbow injury, I couldn't put him on my list because is this guy going to be able to play a whole year? That was my reason for not having him on there. If he's healthy, he's at the bottom of my top 10. Most likely. But yeah.
Yeah, totally fair.
Can I ask you a question, Trevor?
Yeah, man.
If Carson Beck ends the season as the 3rd best quarterback in college football, is Miami finished in the top 25? This is where I'm having trouble with you not having Miami in the top 25, but having Carson Beck number 3 quarterback. Now, we've said the top 25 was a preseason top 25. This is a projection of the season, so it's 2 different things. So that's why I'm asking you this question. Is, like, just so we were clear, this isn't me challenging you. It's the preseason ranking is about where teams are now.
Yep.
This is a projection of what we think will happen during the season.
Yep.
If Drew Aller plays like the number 3, Carson Beck plays like number 3 quarterback in the country, where does Miami finish the season?
In the top 20.
Okay.
I would say. I don't think they make the playoffs. A lot of my pushback with Miami comes from people projecting them as a playoff team or as a preseason top 10 team. I will admit it was a little harsh to leave them completely out of my top 25, but looking at what they bring back outside of Carson Beck, I really just don't love. I mean, a complete secondary made up of all transfer portal people, all receiving core, all tied together with transfer portal players or unproven players. The reason why I put Carson Beck on my list where I did is I think because of his experience, what I'm projecting is because of his experience at inside big games, being the starting quarterback at Georgia under Kirby Smart for 2 seasons. I think his experience will help be able to bring them together a little bit more than maybe what I don't know, like what you want to call it, like a transfer portal kind of mercenary would in the portal. So that's the project. Now, when I say top 3, this is when it comes into what it means for their team. I don't think he's going to be putting up Heisman numbers like what a Lenore Sellers could, what a Cade Klubnik could. But if he can bring that team together, because their schedule is favorable, they don't leave the state of Florida until November.
Yeah.
And so if he is able to make it work, his performance on the, all things considered would put him up there for me. But I definitely get that's a totally valid question.
One of my concerns with Carson Beck also is people talk about the teams he's beat. If you go back and watch a lot of those games, I don't think he necessarily played all that great in a lot of those games. Like the Texas game, he's pretty bad against Texas.
Yep.
Both times. He didn't play very well. I mean, he played poorly against Ole Miss this year. The only good team he really played well against for 4 quarters is Tennessee. He owns Tennessee because he ripped them up this year and he ripped them up last year. Like, I think his game against Tennessee last year might have been, or 2023 might have been the best game of his career. But, he was a big reason why they were down 28-0 Alabama. Then he throws for a bunch of yards, and then the game's on the line, and they're going for a game, game-winning drive at the end of that game, and he throws a pick in the end zone. Or game-tying drive, throws a pick in the end zone. He played terrible against Texas. Threw for 175 yards and 3 picks, no touchdowns. The defense won that game. And then he didn't play very well against Texas. He had 56 yards at halftime. So I just think he's a guy that's been a part of a good team. I just question how good he actually is in those moments. And he won't have that defense and that town around him. He doesn't have Brock Bowers to throw to, Ladd McConkey to throw to. To your point, when he had those guys and played a soft schedule, he looked like a great quarterback. When he didn't, now we've got to make all these excuses on why he didn't look that good.
Sure.
And that's kind of my pushback. But you are correct. There aren't many quarterbacks that have played in more big games the last 2 years than Carson Beck. You've got the bullseye on your chest every time you take the field when you're at Georgia. So I will give him that. Let's talk about some of the other ones. So go ahead, Vince.
Yeah, I was going to say, so you guys talked at the top of the show about how, this is a projection. And so you guys are taking some liberties about what you think they're going to be doing this year and some things like that. And I know that you guys kind of shied away from first-year starters that don't have any kind of production, right? Mm-hmm. And so there were guys that I think you guys struggled with keeping off of your list. And so there's kind of an honorable mention, if you will. And so I want to give each of you guys an opportunity to talk about some guys that you really did contemplate putting on the list, but didn't, but guys you're going to be keeping your eye on who have the potential of jumping into that top 10, throughout the season.
Let's just kind of go one each, Trev.
Yeah.
I'll bring up one, you bring up one.
There you go.
I had a hard time leaving DJ Lagway off my list, but the reason why is there's twofold. Number one is like he's got to be a way better decision maker. You look at like the 2 picks he threw against Tulane. They were terrible interceptions. You're like, dude, you threw it right to a guy and you didn't see him. But the other thing is also, like with Carson Beck, I have major questions about his ability to stay healthy. He has a very unorthodox throwing motion. And when you start hearing about a kid having shoulder, elbow problems, he's got a funky, like high stress type of throwing motion that causes the ball to kind of come out funky at times. I'm really worried about his ability to stay healthy. And he showed me some things this year, but he also showed me he's still very much a work in progress. I think if DJ Lagway was a 3-star recruit that went to Florida and did exactly what he did last year, I don't know that the media is hyping him the way that he did. I think the highest you'll see him ranked is like where Trev has him, like round 8, because he did show some really good things on film last year. But there's people putting him as like the number 1 quarterback in the SEC and stuff like that. And you're like, hold on a second. And so that's something I want to see more of from him. But that was one of the tougher ones. But I just want to explain why he wasn't on my list is I'm concerned about the injuries, and he's got a lot. He's got to show me from a processing standpoint for he can be that. But if he ends the year in the top 10, won't be shocked at all. I just need to see more from him, and then he can stay healthy before I can have him on there.
Give me one of yours, Trevor. What do you got?
Blake Horvath was really hard for me to leave off of my list because of what he means for Navy, because he fits a lot of the criteria that I evaluated this on what he means to the team, the impact of when he's on versus off the field. This probably isn't the most fair way to look at this. I'll be the first person to admit that. But when I look at Navy and Blake Horvath as a whole, if he's on and he's firing, I know I love the fact that they beat Oklahoma in a bowl game last year. But a lot of the other quarterbacks, if they're on and they play up to that level, they're able to compete and potentially beat playoff teams. Navy and Blake Horvath, if he plays to his full potential, I don't think they have the ability to beat a playoff team. I mean, he rushed for 129 yards and a touchdown against Notre Dame last year, and Notre Dame won 51-14. Again, there is a wide margin between Notre Dame, who played for the national championship, and 6-6 Oklahoma. That is also fair to say. I get that. But that is, right or wrong, the group of 5 aspect is kind of what played a little bit into Blake Horvath not making my list. But what was hard is because my criteria was what you mean to your team, what it's like on and off the field. And Blake Horvath 100% fits that bill. I had a very, very hard time with him.
Dylan Raiola was one for me, Trev, I had on my list initially. Him and Avery Johnson are 2 guys that I had on my list initially that I just had to bump down because I just felt other guys. It's more about the floor for a couple other guys was just better for me.
Yeah.
And that's why I left those 2 guys off my list. I think especially Dylan Raiola, it's kind of the opposite for me with you and Carson Beck. I have Nebraska higher, but I don't have Dylan Raiola in my top 10. If they're going to be the team that I think they can be, he's going to have to be a key component, and then he will jump into my top 10. So of all the guys on here that played last year that I think could make me look not smart for having him on there, he's in my top 2 or 3 of guys. Kevin Jennings, another one. I'm just not as high on Kevin Jennings as others are. I get everything you're saying. Statistically, you are correct. The success his team had last year, you are correct. I don't know what it is. I didn't think he played great against Clemson. I know he made some big throws late, but he was the reason they fell behind. And he just looked against Penn State like a kid who didn't belong on that field.
Yeah.
Like just in that moment. And you nailed that. I mean, you called that the ACC title game and, you know, can they really play on that stage? And when he got on the biggest stage, I mean, you know, you're driving down the field and you've got a chance to match a Penn State score and you throw a ball on 4th down that just, you're like, what are you doing? Where you should have run it. And then there's another drive where they're about to score and make it a game again. And he just throws the ball right to a defender. Like he didn't even see the guy. That concerned me for a guy that had as much experience as he has. But when he's on, he's a top, he looks like a top 10 quarterback. Those are a few other guys. I got some more, but those are a few other guys that I had a hard time not putting on my list. There's a couple of other guys I want to talk about that could end up on the top 10, but they weren't guys that I considered putting on the top 10 now. But those are the ones that I looked at, Trev, that I said, okay, I'm having a tough time keeping this guy off. I just think there's better players. Were there any others that were like right there for you?
Right there, no. You mentioned Avery Johnson. I had a tough time with John Mateer because you mentioned it when you talked about him. He's essentially coming from the group of 5 level. And to stay consistent.
I mean, Washington State was, for all intents and purposes, a G5 team last year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're in a tough spot.
And evaluating him the same way that I did Blake Horvath, questions about the group of 5.
Or even Cam Ward, who spent 2 years at Washington State, but that was against a Pac-12 schedule where they were literally playing 9 to 10 Power 5 teams a year. He played 3 last year, including another team in Oregon State that was not really a Power 5 team anymore.
The only other quarterback that I kind of danced around with for a second was Luke Altmaier at Illinois.
Yeah.
But he was someone for me where it's like, did we kind of just see his ceiling last year with how good Illinois was? Maybe, but he's someone that it was more so the people ahead of him than it was like him specifically.
He's the perfect quarterback for Illinois, Trev. He's just he's not a guy that's going to go somewhere else and elevate them. You know, he's the perfect guy for them.
Yep.
That's what he is. Vince, I also wanted to talk about. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say we got kind of one more sub list. Is that what you want to talk about?
It's just the guys that I didn't consider for this top 10 list,
right? That
have the potential to be on this list at the end of the year, but I just don't think warranted consideration for now
because they're first year guys, right?
Or they're younger, raw guys. Yeah. There's just a lot more projection with them than some others. But I've got 5 guys that I look at and say, these guys could all blow up the list by the end of the year. And they're all first or second year players. Well, except for one. I've talked a lot about Aiden Childs in Michigan State. He's the least likely on this list to be there, but he's a guy that I just think guys has loads of tools.
I kind of like him though, man.
Loads of tools.
You know, he obviously moved over from Oregon State, right? And he was at Michigan State last year. A lot of growing pains last year.
A lot of growing pains.
Made a lot of plays, but then made a lot of mistakes.
Yep.
And so I don't know why, but I like
when he's
kid.
on, he looks really good.
Yeah.
And then he can make some other throws. You're like, that guy's got a long way to go.
Yeah, %. So he's feast or famine, boom or bust, whatever you want to use. But I do kind of like him.
Yeah.
I'm with you on that one. I'm with you.
But I didn't even consider him for this list.
No. I agree with that.
Consider him, but
I agree with that.
I could see him kind of having that breakout year where you're like, dude, you should have maybe gone
has
back
a full year under his belt. Like he's got a chance, you know, and it's his second year at Michigan State. So yeah, I agree with you.
Here's another one of my favorites, guys. I love this kid. He's got a ways to go, but I could see him having a big time breakout year. Trev, I've talked about this kid a lot this offseason. It's CJ Bailey at NC State. Love this kid as a true freshman last year. You know, obviously had to replace Grayson McCall, who got injured and just wasn't effective. He ended up throwing for 2,413 yards, 17 touchdowns, 10 picks. He ran for 279 yards and 5 more touchdowns as a true freshman. I mean, you could argue his numbers as a true freshman were more impressive than Dylan Raiola's as a true freshman. I just think there's a different pressure on him than there was Dylan Raiola because he didn't start the season as the starter. By the time he steps into the starting lineup, they've already been blown out once, or actually blown out twice because I think he came off he didn't start against Clemson, right, Trev? Isn't that one of the games where Grayson McCall got hurt? I thought Grayson McCall was out that game, so I'm incorrect. But I just felt like he's a guy that in year 2 could make a big jump, but there's just a long way to go. Plus you lost, Kevin Concepcion, your offensive line's getting a little bit reworked, but I love CJ Bailey. Love that kid. Damond Williams from Washington is another guy on my list. He just doesn't have enough experience as a quarterback for me to put him on there where he's got to be the guy. He played a lot last year. Started, I think the last 2 games he started for Washington? I think it was the last 2 games he started when they made the move to him. I don't remember if Will Rogers was hurt. And I thought he performed very well. He was great in the bowl game against Louisville. But that's kind of 2 games. He was a very dynamic runner. He's a kid that is going to have a shot to be a playmaker. I just want to see him handle the pressure of being the guy. But if the way he played against Louisville is any indication of what that kid is going to be, and I thought he battled his butt off against Oregon, but they got blown out that game. But he played great against Louisville. Dante Moore from Oregon is another guy that could easily jump on this list by the end of the year. I need to see how Dante handles the pressure of being a starting quarterback. That's a big concern I have. That kid throws a gorgeous football. He's a talented quarterback. He's going to have unproven, but still good weapons around him. And Will Stein is a heck of an offensive coordinator.
Yeah.
I just want to see that Will Stein can design an offense for a quarterback who can't run or doesn't run. That's my big fear with Dante at Oregon is can Will Stein adjust his play calling and coaching style to not ask Dante Moore to run the way that Dylan Gabriel and Bo Nix did. That's my big question. But I can easily see Dante on that list. And my last guy, CJ Carr from Notre Dame. I cannot in good faith and have a guy that's never thrown a pass in college be on my top 10 list. I don't care how talented he is. I've got to see it. And he's never thrown a pass in college. He played 1 game and he came and handed the ball off, and that's all he's ever done. So I couldn't be there. But, guys, if Notre Dame's going to be the team that we think they're going to be and CJ Carr's the starting quarterback, I think CJ is going to end the season as potentially being in this conversation. But I just couldn't project it without having seen him play. Will I be shocked if by the end of the year CJ Carr is one of the 10 best quarterbacks in college football? No, I won't. And that's what made this so hard because – I look at this and say, boy, there's a lot of dudes on here that you could throw Julian Sayin in there. Andrew Gilmore just brought up Julian Sayin. I think Julian Sayin's going to produce this year, but I don't know that he'll be the driver of the production. It's going to be the system and the players around him. I'm not as high on Julian Saint as others, but he's going to put up numbers if he's the starting quarterback at Ohio State. I just don't know that he's on the level of these guys as a player. That's just my opinion. I didn't view him as a 5-star. You could add him to that list from a production standpoint, but guys, I could see the top 10. Like, I'm comfortable with this top 10. I don't feel a lot of conflicted about it, but in no year have I ever thought that. It won't shock me though if by the end of the year, over half these guys in my current top 10 are not in my postseason top 10.
Agreed.
Because of guys like Dylan Raiola
guys,
and
yeah.
CJ Carr, Damon Williams, CJ Bailey, Aiden Childs. Does Noah Fafita have a bounce back year at Arizona? He's another guy to kind of keep in mind. You know, if Julian Saint goes out there and puts up monster numbers, this is one of those years. Dante Moore, this is one of those years where I'm comfortable with my list because my list is a lot about floor as well as some ceiling. But there's a lot of guys with low floors but really high ceilings that could blow this list up. And so don't be shocked if at the end of the year, Trevor and I are putting out top 10 lists that don't look anything like our preseason top 10 lists. Even though our preseason top 10 lists are projections, there's still some guys that could blow this thing up. And that's what I think made it really hard, because there's some like, dude, I can't justify putting him on the list right now. But, man, I think this kid's going to make me look stupid for not having him on my list at the end of the year. Yeah. And CJ Carr's one of them.
But I think that's the fun of it, though, right, Trevor? I mean, that's the fun of this list because there is so much parity. Is that the right word at the quarterback position for this season coming up? I mean, you don't have those entrenched starters that have just proven track records and all of that. You just don't have a bunch of those guys. And so that's why your guys is like 5 through 10. It's just kind of a jumble because you just don't know what that's going to be. And you guys did the best, you pledged your cases, made the best case scenarios for a lot of these guys, and it makes a lot of sense. But who knows what that's going to look like at the end of the year. Trevor, did you have anybody that you wanted to throw on here that Bryan didn't? I thought you might.
Yeah. Or if you want to expand on a couple of those guys too that you might like as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. One, Vince, I think you hit the nail on the head. The one thing that's so difficult about this list is I think you could argue the majority of the highest ceiling players, quarterbacks in college football, aren't in our top 10 lists. The CJ Carrs.
High ceiling?
Oh, yes. Yeah. And that's what's going to make this season so interesting. Because the people at the top of my list are guys that are second year, third year starters, going on their second school. They have over X amount of wins, yada, yada, yada. A couple of the players that I had not a hard time leaving off this list. I had an easy time leaving them off this list, but could make me look a little dumb at the end of the season. One of them is Eli Holstein at Pitt. I'm really high on him. He is one of very few quarterbacks that started out last season throwing for 3 touchdown passes in 5 consecutive games. He started out the season with 15 touchdown passes and 1 pick. Health is going to be a big question for me if he can stay healthy, because we've seen what Pitt looks like when he's healthy. Mm-hmm. They started out the season 7-0. He wasn't healthy to finish the season, and they lost 6 straight games. So you have this dichotomy of 2 completely different seasons wrapped up into one of them with a healthy Eli Holstein, the other one without one. What's 2025 have in store for him? Another quarterback that I'm keeping my eye on, I don't know if he's going to crack the top 10, but somebody I'm keeping my eye on is Marcel Reed at Texas A&M, another polarizing player. But Colin Klein's going into year 2. The offensive personnel that they have this year, I think, fits more of what Klein wants to do down in College Station. Different looking receiving core. You now have fast players good with the ball in their hands. Like, you don't have 6'6" Noah Thomas. You have a bunch of scat guys. You combine that with his playmaking ability, I think that's interesting. And then, of course, I have CJ Carr on my list. Like Bryan said, don't want to rehash that. Same thing with Julian Saint. Julian Saint could accidentally throw for 3,800 yards this season because he's throwing to Jeremiah Smith.
That doesn't make him – like Archer's thing was, how do you not have Julian Saint in there? He's got the best receiving core in college football. That doesn't mean he's good. That means he's going to put up numbers. And I like Julian Saint. He's a good player. I just don't think he's an elite talent. I think he's a good talent that will put up good numbers because of the system he's in and the talent he has around him.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that you're an elite quarterback. I mean, Sawyer Robertson put up really big numbers last year at Baylor. I never considered him in the top 10.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's just, Billy Edwards put up a lot of numbers last year at Maryland. I never considered him for the top 10. So sure. It goes a lot further than that. It goes a lot further than that. This is going to be a fun year because you guys said it I would argue that the best talent at quarterback in the 2025 season are going to be guys in year 1 and year 2 of being in college. Like,
I could definitely see that. Yeah.
Like, it's just physically gifted players.
Yeah.
Like, with all due respect, I love Cade Klubnik. I think he gets underrated for his talent, but he doesn't have the talent of some CJ Carr and some of these guys, in my opinion. He's a very underrated player, but like, these guys have way higher ceilings.
Yeah.
But, Josh Hoover couldn't sniff CJ Carr from just a raw talent standpoint. Same thing with CJ Bailey and he doesn't have talent of Julian Sayin and some of those guys. So Damon Williams, Aiden Childs, he's just a really good college quarterback right now. And that's why I think this list could get blown up, in my opinion, guys, because there's just a lot of those second-year players, first-year starters that could be in there. I don't have Bryce Underwood in there. I'm not putting any freshmen on this list. And I don't even know that Bryce Underwood's going to start at the beginning of the season. Like, he'll eventually start, but like if Michigan's smart, they don't need to rush him. Take some of the pressure off. Let Mikey Keene maybe start the Oklahoma game, and then bring Bryce off the bench. If I was Michigan, I would do with Bryce Underwood exactly what Clemson did with Trevor Lawrence in 2018.
Sure.
And that is play him in each game, but have him come in and play a series here and there. And then when you think he's ready, then you get him in there. So there's a lot of guys that I like, guys, but I could mention a lot of other quarterbacks that I think are good. Somebody brought up Fernando Mendoza. Andrew Gilmore brought up the Dampier kid from Utah. Those guys are really good college quarterbacks. There's a lot of this. This is going to be a fun year of watching football, guys, because Rocco Beck, Taylon Green, Diego Pavia, who does not belong in a top 10 quarterback conversation. And I would simply argue, go look at what he did the second half of the year when people got more film on him, and you'll understand why I don't have him in my top 10. But he's still a good quarterback. Kevin Jennings is in my top 10. There's a lot of guys coming back. That I mentioned Taylon Green. Gio Lopez at North Carolina is one of my under-the-radar transfer portal pickups this season. I just don't know about the talent around him. It's actually, I think, going to be a really fun year of watching quarterbacks. We didn't bring up the Maddox Madsen kid who went to the playoffs last year, at Boise State. There's a lot of good quarterbacks in the country, but these are the guys that we talked about that are the cream of the crop, either in production or talent, and that's what separates the guys that are good college quarterbacks from the guys we're talking about for a top 10 quarterback list. And I think it's going to be a fun year. I think next year, a lot of the guys we talked about at the end of our show are the guys we're going to be talking about at the beginning of our show. There's going to be a change. There's going to be a changing of the guard at some point in time this season, where we're going to see that. Okay, it's time now that these guys are taking over.
Mm-hmm.
But even on our list, there's young guys. Sam Levitt's a third, redshirt sophomore. Arch Manning's a redshirt sophomore. I mean, there's DJ Lagway's a sophomore. There's even some still young guys on the list, and there's even more that are going to be. Ooh, boy. Yeah, it's going to be a fun year.
Yeah,
it's going to be a fun year,
and that's the bottom line. This is going to be a fun year, and we're going to do more things like this in the college football world moving forward throughout the summer. So make sure you guys stay tuned, and you also want to check out our other channel. Just going to throw that out there, CFB Nation. You want to check that out?
This breakdown will go up on our CFB Nation podcast and video as well.
Yeah, so you want to check that out if you guys want more college football related material to watch and hang on to. You want to go and subscribe to that channel and check out what we've got going on over there. And again, it's also we have a CFB Nation podcast channel as well, so you want to get over there and subscribe to that too. So definitely want to check that out. All part of the Irish Breakdown world. IB Nation. Okay, so you want to check all that out. We've got all kinds of good stuff to show you. So thanks for hanging out with us, everybody. Really appreciate it. Make sure you hit that like button, that subscribe button, that notification bell. Share with your family and friends. And, of course, the boards.irishbreakdown.com. It's our premium message board. It's where you get all the intel, all the good stuff. That's where you want to get it from. So definitely check that out. It's the best money you can buy in the area. And no, I am not biased in any way, shape, or form. You want to check that out. boards.irishbreakdown.com. And again, I always like to bring it up.
Just because you're biased doesn't mean you're not wrong. I mean, you can be biased and right at the same time.
That's a great point. That's a fantastic point. You are so right on that one. And then obviously check out irishbreakdown.com for a bunch of written content as well. class impact on certain guys committing and all of those fun stuff. So you want to check that out. Trevor and Bryan are always busy pumping out content for irishbreakdown.com as well. So premium message boards, irishbreakdown.com. Hit the subscribe button on your favorite podcast channel. All of it. Hit that notification bell. There could be shows coming up in the evening.
There's going to be some impromptu shows coming
Just
up
saying.
in the next couple weeks.
Could be a few. Just throwing it out there. So really appreciate you guys hanging out.
We're gonna have some 3-show days coming up the next couple weeks.
Right. So definitely check that out. We're working overtime, but we love doing it for all of you guys. So thanks for hanging out with us, everybody. For Bryan and Trevor, I'm Vince, and we will talk to you next time on the Irish Breakdown Podcast.